This is Adam Graham from Pretty Much the Present, bringing you a week of old-time radio podcasts. These episodes were originally released back in 2011, and we're releasing them here pretty much as is, with only some extraneous bits such as the opening from all of the episodes after the first episode removed. Because these are old, it should be noted that any offers or promotions mentioned in the episode may not be valid unless they're currently mentioned on the Great Detectives website. Here now is a week of old-time radio detective podcast. Welcome to the Great Detectives of Old Time Radio. From Boise, Idaho, this is your host, Adam Graham. If you have a comment, email it to me, box13@greatdetectives.net. Give us a call, 208-991-4783, and become one of our friends on Facebook, facebook.com/Radio Detectives. Well, this episode of the Great Detectives of Old Time Radio is brought to you by the financial support of our listeners. Thank you so much for all of your support. We really appreciate it. Today's episode of Barrie Craig, Confidential Investigator. It's from July 19th, 1953, and the title is Scream for Murder.
William Gargan stars as Barrie Craig, Confidential Investigator.
A squabbling couple can always bury their differences. The question is, which of them doesn't mind underground shelter?
The National Broadcasting Company presents William Gargan in another transcribed drama of mystery and adventure with America's #1 detective, Barrie Craig, Confidential Investigator.
Barrie Craig speaking. Marriages may be made in heaven, but they sometimes can end in the city morgue. I know one that did. Almost, that is. A bridegroom the lucky wife loved so passionately she kept trying to exterminate him. The pigeon's name was one to remember, Killer Bess, an ex-pugilist billed as the perfect specimen. He had forceps and biceps like that, and a chest expansion that reached clear to Madagascar. Added to that, he'd read a book and memorized quite a vocabulary. I first met him in his hour of agony in the Cabana Adora, Eats Table d'Hote, where girls in short skirts and long stockings sold you cigarettes at $5 a pack. I was there with Trav Rogers celebrating his birthday. Even lieutenants of homicide have birthdays, if they live to see it, that is. Trav was living. The only immediate threat to his future was the steak he was wolfing.
This food is all right.
Tell me that again, Trav, when you see the check.
Well, how many birthdays does a man have?
One a year, the rumor is.
Place is crawling with celebrities.
Yeah, I see. There's Marshmallow Midas over there.
Marshmallow Midas?
The Hot Lips trumpet player.
Oh. Say, I thought he was dead.
His agent dug him up. A 40-week contract came along.
You keep informed.
Yeah, I'm a who's who. Over there, getting nicely potted, Killer Bess.
Welterweight contender.
Light heavy and ex-contender. He had his nose rebuilt and hung up his gloves.
He married into society, no? An educated guy for a fighter.
He read Pilgrim's Progress and Frank Merriwell.
A polysyllabic grunter.
You kill you. Uh-oh, Trav.
What?
Look at the killer change colors.
Change colors?
From rosy red to green.
He's gagging. Gasping for breath.
He's not gasping anymore, Trav. He's conked out. We next saw Killer Best in the Southmore Hospital, a private place where checkbook society can recover from the sheer ordeal of living. The killer was no longer green in the face. He was blue. I let Trav Rogers hold bedside hands with him. I only listened.
You were poisoned, killer.
Poison? But that's...
Not only possible, but a proven fact. I had the sedimentation in your glass sent to chemical analysis. Somebody loaded your drink.
Then if it was poison, why am I alive now, talking to you?
An excellent question. I've asked it, too. There are a couple of likely theories on that. One, you have a certain immunity to a poison of this type, or two, you hadn't taken enough of it to be fatal.
I've got an awful stomachache.
Oh, you imagine it. Your stomach's empty. It's been pumped here in the hospital while you were unconscious.
When can I get up?
When you can stand without falling down. Who did it?
I don't know.
Who are your enemies?
No more, please. I've been pumped enough for one day.
You don't want the police involved, hmm?
Now that you ask me, no. You fellas are too public. I don't want to be a public problem like highway repairs and sanitation. No thanks.
Then, might I suggest somebody confidential?
Who?
His right hand. Barrie, make your sale.
Barrie Craig, killer, confidential investigator. I've got blue eyes, and I'm kind to dumb animals. Not that I like to ambulance chase, but I'm all worn out looking for hen's teeth.
You mean clients are scarce?
You've read my diary, and I read your value on the hoof.
Meaning I've got money.
Meaning I haven't got money.
You're hired on condition that you keep wisecracking.
And that I find out why you're marked for extinction?
Yeah, that too. Your friend here, the lieutenant...
Trav Rogers of Homicide.
Send him away and then notify my wife for me. Mona Best, Lawrence 6, 4000.
What will I tell her?
That circumstances make it impossible for me to be home for dinner.
I call the wife as requested to reassure her about the love of her life, perfect specimen, Killer Bess. Her more killed than killer husband. But Mona Bess didn't need reassurance. A funeral would have delighted her.
Hello?
Mona Bess?
Yes, this is Mona Bess.
This is Barrie Craig.
Should I know the name?
I've had skywriters advertising it. I'm a detective.
I've reported no robberies this month.
We've got a comic routine going. I've got serious news, lady.
I despise serious news.
Do you love your husband?
That is a leading question, Mr. Craig.
Meaning you don't.
I'm ambivalent.
Too big a word for me.
I love him and I loathe him.
Which half of you is operating right now?
The worst half.
Then the bad news I've got will be good news to you.
He's been arrested for public drunkenness.
He's been hospitalized for public collapse. He was poisoned at the Cabana Adora. You want to console him? He's in room 602 in the Southmore Hospital, Midtown.
Thank you for the invitation.
But you won't come.
I haven't time. I'm due for a pedicure. Besides, I haven't the inclination. Please give the fallen gladiator my anxious wish for his speedy demise.
Some marriages can really be colorful. Back at the bedside, the killer showed a sense of humor.
She told you to throw dirt in my face. Bury me deep.
She's bashful about her love. It embarrasses her. Her hard-hearted talk is a cover-up.
You've got good sense, Craig.
Have I?
Mona is soft as mush. The surface is only a shell. I'm the love of her life, but, as you say, she covers it. She talks tough through her martinis. It's the ancient female device. Keep the man guessing a little. Never let him take you for granted.
I've heard of husbands kidding themselves like that, but we're avoiding the gruesome. Who tried to kill you?
I wish I could tell you.
For a starter, name me personal enemies with strong motives against you.
No.
No, meaning there aren't any?
There are some. What man doesn't make enemies?
So?
I don't want to slander people, make hysterical guesses about who hates me enough to want to murder me. You find out for me on your own. Don't even keep me posted. Just tell me the climax when you come to it. Until then, I want peace of mind. I want to drink with a friend without analyzing the contents of the glass. Dig into my life, Craig. Do your worst and best. Now, help me stand up and get dressed, please. The antiseptic smell around here is getting me sick.
I did my worst and best, checking into the life and times of an ex-pug gone blue blood and social register. At headquarters, Trav Rogers had as many facts for me as I could digest.
The killer's history makes a fascinating story.
I'll retire to a farm and write it at the age of 86.
I know another book the intellectually inclined killer read.
This is besides Pilgrim's Progress and Frank Merriwell?
The author, Somerset Maugham, a book titled Of Human Bondage.
Do we have to go through with this aside?
A learned note here and there. It adds a fillip to the ordinary crime puzzles.
Okay, get it said.
There is a passage in Of Human Bondage that likens life to a Persian rug. In your living, you weave a rug. Your experiences are threads to the rug. The author urges every man to make his life experiences colorful and exciting, so the rug will be a weaver's masterpiece of colored threads.
And that was Killer Best. Every day a color job.
He's fought, laughed, brawled, wandered, loved, married, divorced, remarried. Like him or dislike him, he's at least annihilated monotony.
Now some monotonous Mo wants to annihilate him. Who is the Mo, Trav?
I'll give you a rundown. You can make your own choice of suspect. Ex-wives with mutilated hearts and broken egos? The killer has 3. All capable of the ultimate crime against an erstwhile spouse who loved and decamped. Men about town organized into a Let's Kill the Killer club? There are a few of those. Killer Best has been the snake in many a man's garden. A constitutional homewrecker. I'll pass over a legion of waiters and taxi drivers whose jaws were damaged in early A.M. rhubarbs with Killer Best. I'll also pass over some 50 litigants who have sued Killer Best for every civil offense in Blackstone. Sued and lost, that is. But I will remark on his present helpmate.
Mona.
Once Mona Phipps. A tabloid once featured her as the Society Borgia.
Lucretia Borgia, the lady of ancient Rome who showed a talent with poison. Is that the reference meant?
It is. It seems Mona, like her current husband, was also thrice wed. 2 husbands were shed in Reno and Las Vegas. A third died mysteriously.
Poison?
The case never stood up quite. His body was exhumed and the vitals sent to autopsy.
But?
The exhumation took place 3 years after his death.
Too late to prove poison.
Yeah. There is one more enemy of the killer's worth remarking on.
So remark.
A lad named Polonius. Remember him?
Vaguely. Wait. Kid Polonius. A prize fighter, wasn't he?
Yes. A contender who ran afoul of the killer. They had a match. Polonius was knocked out in 4 rounds.
So?
Polonius lost the sight of one eye. After the fight, he accused the killer of having sprayed his gloves with a blinding chemical. Polonius sued and lost, then swore revenge. He attempted that revenge.
In what way?
A felonious assault on the killer with a knife.
Polonius? Polonius.
The killer pressed charges. Polonius served 18 months in the workhouse. Polonius went free last week.
Free 1 week and stewing over his misfortunes. Quite a lead there, Trav. You know, I think I'll go see Polonius pronto. Polonius took a lot of catching. His address was whereabouts unknown. The workhouse warden had no address on him, and neither did his aged mother. I interviewed fighters, dice players, bartenders, and I came away with 0. Polonius and the American Buffalo, they both vanished from Times Square. When I located Polonius at long last, I'd lost 2 days of my fading youth and $50. The dough was for information. A bookie named Catastrophe had the address for a price. A fraternity building next door to a college. Polonius was the building janitor.
Who's there?
Open up, Polonius. I want to talk to you. Polonius had more equipment than a building janitor needed. He had a baseball bat, and he held it like Mickey Mantle.
What do you want of me?
The question should be, what do you want to do to me?
I'm protecting myself.
Against?
False arrest. Cops hounding me out of a job. Cops making me pull up stakes and go every time I get set somewhere.
Why would cops want to do that to you?
They're doing it. You're here.
Not to hound you.
Good to hear. Then beat it.
Before you beat my brains in?
I didn't ask you here.
No. I'll take the bat.
Hey, let go! No, Okay, you win.
I don't mind a little baseball fever, but my head's too big for a regulation ball. Now, what's really on your conscience, Polonius?
Nothing. And don't ask me, did I poison the killer?
You know about that, huh?
It's in the papers. And a paragraph in the story reminding that I just finished serving time for trying to bump the killer 2 years ago.
You didn't this time.
No. I gave up thinking like that in the workhouse. Do a rap, you change your thinking.
I imagine. You now feel more kindly disposed toward the killer?
I'd be a liar if I said I did. I hate him. I'd like to see him dead. Only I don't want to be the one who kills him.
Why not?
I got a life to live. I can't live it in jail. I got this job here. I want to settle down to it. I got a girl. I want to get married, raise a family.
Nice idea.
But I won't be able to with somebody out to knock the killer off. He'll get it next time, and I'll be the goat. I'm a dog with a bad name now. They'll blame me. They'll blame me.
Polonius wasn't as felonious as advertised. He'd given up on his deadly grudge against Killer Best, so he said anyhow. When he came out of the weeps, he proved what a peaceable citizen he had now become.
Listen, Mr.
Barrie Craig.
Mr. Craig, you can do a big thing for me.
Like?
Catch who poisoned the killer that other night. Nab whoever it was and take the heat off me.
I'll be glad to oblige if I'm lucky. It happens to be my assignment.
Well, make it your double assignment. Represent me, too.
I'm expensive.
Well, I got $100. I was going to get a new suit and shoes, but I'll give it to you.
Keep your money. If you're on the level, you'll come out okay, Polonius. I'm after the poisoner, and I figure to catch him. So long. Oh, yes. Here's your baseball bat. Buy yourself a horsehide ball out of that 100 the next time you get that urge to swing that bat. I went back to my office, where I always go to do my best thinking. In the horizontal, on my leather sofa. Not my favorite sofa, exactly. It had too much sag. But what can you expect when you buy things secondhand? There was no conclusion to my thinking after an hour or two. How could there be? I'd fallen fast asleep. The phone woke me up. Yeah?
Barrie, this is Trav Rogers.
As usual, right in the middle of my dreams.
Are you still representing Killer Best?
Misrepresenting him. I've so far done nothing for him but spend his money. Why do you ask?
Only curiosity. I thought you might be interested in his present whereabouts.
Whereabouts? Let me see. It's 4 p.m. He's toasting himself in his favorite spa.
He is not?
I give up.
Back where you commenced representing him. The Southmore Hospital emergency.
Not more poison.
No. A near cave-in of his head.
Near cave-in?
A roof cornice narrowly missed him.
From being narrowly missed by a roof cornice, you don't go to a hospital.
Clever of you. The cornice missed him, but the dagger didn't.
Oh, stupid of me.
He was knifed 2 hours ago, a block or so from his residence, while out for an evening stroll. And, Barrie.
Yeah?
Polonius. You won't be visiting him at home for a while.
Where will he be?
Where he is. In jail. We caught him prowling in the general vicinity where the killer was knifed.
In the hospital, some of the starch was out of the killer. He looked scared and trying not to show it. The knife gash on his shoulder and forearm seemed to hurt like the devil, even though the patient tried to grin.
I've survived again. That's something to be thankful for.
2 strikes. Next time up, somebody's out.
See that it isn't me.
I'm working in the total dark.
You've got Polonius.
You accuse him?
No, I didn't actually see the knifer.
That cornice that came down on you. Tell me more about it.
There's not much to tell. I was out walking at the corner of 78th. Boom, came the cornice. It landed practically at my feet.
The dagger came after?
Yes, 3 minutes later. I backtracked. I was 1 block from home when I got it from behind.
The dagger wasn't found.
So the police tell me.
I'll have the area combed, inch for inch, sewers, cellars, places.
You think my attacker might have thrown it away?
They generally do. Get caught running, it's evidence against them on the spot. They're red-handed.
I did make an outcry. I yelled police. My assailant would be running pell-mell. He no doubt would have ditched the deck. Craig.
Yeah?
When I'm out of here, put a man on me, day and night. An operative following me around heel and toe. I want protection.
In the tombs, Polonius looked like he was on a marathon crying jag.
Craig, get me out of here.
If you merit it.
You don't think I knifed the killer?
Didn't you? Why were you prowling in the vicinity where the attack occurred?
I was following the killer around to see who might attempt to kill him. I wanted to insure myself against being made somebody's fall guy.
I thought I was to take care of that.
Yeah, I know. You were representing me, but frankly, Mr. Craig, I had no confidence in you.
I see.
So I'm a schmo. Please, Mr. Craig, get me out of here.
I'm afraid you're in for a while, at least.
In? For nothing? Just for walking on a street?
Just for climbing up on strange roofs and prying cornices loose.
You lay that to me?
Lie and you'll grow a long beard and stir.
And what if I tell the truth?
I might intercede for you. Get you paroled in my custody. After you've repented in here long enough. I only might, mind you.
Okay. I dropped that cornice.
You said you were cured. You'd given up seeking revenge.
Yeah, I know I said, but there was the killer on a stroll for himself, dressed like an English lord and wearing a fancy vest and spats. My blood got hot. I looked at my crummy pants and the cardboard in my shoes. I thought of how he used chemicals on those boxing gloves once and cost me a chance at the title, let alone this eye here. I went up to the roof. It was temporary insanity, Mr. Craig. Plead with the judge for me like that. Only temporary insanity. I'm better now.
Was Polonius an honest man or a liar? I couldn't swear. But one thing was for sure, he was a character. I organized the search for the dagger used on Killer Bess. Look for a dagger in a square-mile area, you really know suffering.
No luck so far, Barrie.
It figured to be tough.
I've got men in wading boots sifting sewer slop, men emptying trash cans and poking into cellars.
Nice cooperation, Trav. Thanks.
Oh, don't be so egotistic. I'm doing this on behalf of the people of the city of New York.
Oh, pardon me.
The assailant may not have thrown his dagger away.
They invariably do.
Still. Oh, wait. Here comes Detective Wilson with a look on him that can only mean one thing.
Eureka. He's found the dagger. Finding a dagger is one thing. Tracing it to its source is a horse of another breed. After the same 14 men, plus yours truly, got ourselves acute atrophy of the metatarsals, our aching feet, that is, we gave up canvassing storekeepers. Later, on an idea that didn't seem too bright to me, I tackled Mrs. Killer Bess, Mona. Tried tackling, I mean. Mona wasn't home. Her social secretary, a good-looker named Candy Joplin, was.
Can I help you, Mr. Craig?
Yeah. First, where is Madame?
Out.
Just out?
She didn't say where.
I've got something here. A dagger. Ever see it?
I'm not sure.
You think you might have?
Yes. In a case in the library, I seem to remember a pair of antique daggers.
Let's adjourn to the library. Is that the case?
Yes.
Well, what do you know? Here's the twin to the one I brought in. Who owns these daggers? Mr. or Mrs.?
I don't think I'm able to answer that. But I think I can be of some help.
Please be.
The daggers, they're antique.
They're antique.
Mrs. Best shops for her antiques at the Attic Mart on 3rd Avenue. I've often stopped in there with her.
The Attic Mart. Unaccustomed as I am to antique hunting. Goodbye, doll. At the Attic Mart, the guy who looked more worn out than his merchandise confirmed who purchased the dagger.
Yes, I have the entry here. Mrs. Best, a fine lady.
You mean a fine customer, don't you?
Yes. She's here every week, always to buy. This particular dagger, it's a very good specimen of old Persian craftsmanship.
I've heard enough.
There is perhaps something you would care to be shown?
There is. The door. Following A.M., I went back for a tete-a-tete with Mona Bess. The lady was still unavailable. The social secretary, Candy Joplin, was on hand.
I'm sorry, Mr. Craig.
What makes Mrs. Best so scarce around here?
Frankly, Mr. Craig, I wonder myself. Suddenly, in the last days, she doesn't confide her itinerary. Mr. Craig.
Yeah?
You're a detective.
So I am.
What do you want with Mrs. Best?
Right now, I want to examine her. I'll give it to you cold. The dagger I matched to one in the library case was the same dagger used on Killer Best.
I see. Then you suspect Mrs. Best of attempting his life?
Uh-huh. Do you?
That is an improper question.
Well, do you?
Mrs. Best has behaved peculiarly. I've sensed, jitters.
Don't stop now.
I wasn't entirely truthful yesterday. I didn't think it properly my business. Your question about Mrs. Best's whereabouts...
Be truthful now.
Well, the fact is, I saw her packed secretly. It seemed to me 2 valises. I heard her on the telephone making plane reservations.
Where to?
Acapulco, Mexico. This was the night before last.
Skipped, huh? Attempted murder and flight.
You mean that...
Mrs. Best is presumably a fugitive from justice. A presumable fugitive from justice, I checked Mona Best's clothes closet. After that, I checked airport records. It proved okay. Item, Mrs. Mona Best, Flight 7, 11:45 p.m. Destination, Acapulco, Mexico. I let police headquarters check it from there.
Mrs. Mona Best landed in Mexico, all right, Barrie?
And?
And nothing. Beyond the airport, the Mexican police have no information. They can't find hide or hair of Mona Best. She's managed to lose herself nicely since her arrival. I'll keep nudging the Mexican police.
Don't bother to.
Did you just say don't bother to?
That's right.
Barrie, you stamped into my office. You all but accused Mona Best of attempted murder and guilty flight.
Now, don't have a seizure. I said not to bother just now because a shaft of daylight suddenly shone in my head.
And the delirium tells you?
That Mona Best is not in Mexico.
Is not?
No.
But you traced it to a plane leaving New York. I placed her in a Mexican airport.
We only checked the name, Mona Best. Could have been anybody, a stand-in, a proxy, say. Said proxy reassumed her own identity on arriving in Mexico. That's why a Mona Best cannot be found.
You've got a notion there.
Bet I've got the answer to a cute technique somebody developed to get away with murder. The murder of Mona Best. I reported the purported death of his wife to my skeptical client, Killer Best.
Craig, the heat's got you. Mona's as alive as you and I.
I don't think so.
Moreover, I'm not so sure I can accept Mona as a suspect in these attempts on my life.
Right now, I'm not so sure I can either. Except Mona as a suspect, that is.
Now you're talking at cross purposes. You said before...
To catch your reaction. No, Mona wasn't behind the attempts on you. As a matter of fact, there never were real attempts on your life.
Now, look here.
You staged them. You poisoned yourself just enough. You stabbed yourself, not too seriously.
Now, why would I hate myself that much?
Because you hated your wife more. I won't right now go into your love for her money. You murdered Mona Best. Then you staged phony attempts on your own life to throw suspicion on her, so her absence would be accounted for. So the world would think Mona Best ran away into hiding, a fugitive from justice. You were smart, really brilliant, except for one fatal flaw. Want to know where your trick failed?
I can't stop you from talking rot.
A fugitive from the police wouldn't make plane reservations in her own name. She'd use an alias. Only thing, you had to have the name of Mona Best on the flight sheet so as to hoodwink the police. You murdered Mona before you staged the so-called attempts on yourself. The social secretary, Candy Joplin, is with you in the scheme. It was she who probably posed as Mona Best on the telephone with me that first time. So was some obliging proxy in with you. I mean, the one who took the plane ride to Acapulco. You sure get girls to cooperate, handsome. Now, the high-voltage question is, where are your wife's remains?
In a culvert. Up near our hunting lodge. I didn't kill her, Craig. It was an accident. We were out hunting deer in season. Mona did weird things with camouflage. I shot her accidentally. I was in a panic. I didn't think the truth.
Cut. You're confusing me with the jury. Even if you convinced me, I couldn't acquit you. I'm only the guy making the arrest, client.
You've been listening to William Gargan in another exciting transcribed mystery drama from the adventures of Barrie Craig, confidential investigator. Tonight's story, Screen for Murder, was written by John Robert. Next week, it's a strange story titled Murder in 3 Acts, about which Barrie Craig has this to say.
Next week, a blonde, a bookie, and a gentleman of no distinction form a partnership in crime, only to find that the road to the hot seat is paved with bad intentions. Good night, folks. See you next week.
The National Broadcasting Company has brought you Barrie Craig, confidential investigator, starring William Gargan. Featured in the role of Candy was Fran Carlin. This is Don Pardo speaking.
This is NBC, the National Broadcasting Company.
Welcome back. Well, I always have mixed feelings when our hero gets a confession out of the murderer at the end of the program. Of course, with some series, this is practically a fundamental operating principle, such as the Perry Mason shows. But it bothers me when the evidence that they get them to confess on is less than solid. And this is certainly the case, though you can argue if the champ was telling the truth, maybe it makes sense then. Because with Craig onto him, eventually Craig would find some actual evidence. Plus, I kind of felt that the episode ran counter to the opening monologue. When I heard the opening monologue, I thought, well, you're kind of giving away the plot. Instead, it turns out that they told us what the plot was going to be, but it wasn't that. Well, I should mention there were 4 episodes between last week's show and this one. There was the Jade Bracelet, Death Has a Number, The Case of the Divided Man, and then there was one episode that was unknown what the name of it is. Well, now we turn to listener comments and feedback. This one comes over on Podcast Alley, podcastalley.greatdetectives.net. The audio quality is great, and the variety is impressive. I've learned to like shows I had never heard of before. Well, thanks so much, and that's definitely something we go for, as we rediscover some lost shows and lost series that I think folks will enjoy. And so I always like to maintain a good combination of the better and lesser known programs. So folks will hopefully come to the podcast for the well-known programs and then catch some of those series that they may not have heard of. Well, that will do it for today. We will be back tomorrow with Candy Matson, and then join us on Monday for another episode of Barrie Craig, Confidential Investigator. Well, this episode of the Great Detectives of Old Time Radio is brought to you by the financial support of our listeners. Thank you so much for your support. Today's episode of Candy Matson is called the Eric Spaulding Concert, and it aired about 6 weeks after the previous episode we played. So here it is now from February 7th, 1950, the Eric Spaulding Concert.
Hello, Yukon 28209. Yes, this is Candy Matson.
The National Broadcasting Company presents Candy Matson, Yukon 28209.
Hello?
Oh, girl, this is Rembrandt. I've been trying to get in touch with you for the last 3 days.
I've been smog-bound.
What?
I've been visiting an aunt of mine in Los Angeles, Ducky.
A fate worse than death. However, I am glad to know you're back. How's your feeling for long-hair music, Dove?
I can take it or leave it. Why?
In this case, I hope you can take it. Ever hear of a gentleman named Eric Spaulding?
The noted English symphony conductor? Oh, of course.
I used to know him in London. He's here to conduct a series of concerts.
Bully for him. I know where I can get him a baton wholesale.
He needs more than a baton, Candy dear. He needs help. That's why I'm calling you.
What do you want me to do, look for the lost chord?
You don't know how close to being right you are, girl. Anyway, he's going to drop by me place this evening. I wonder if you could come over, too.
Well, I was going to hit the prone position early tonight, but if you really want me to be there, I'll do it.
Splendid, Candy. Come for dinner, won't you? I just bought a new chafing dish, and I'm whipping up a tasty scraping of pasta rasson.
Well, how interesting.
It is. It's spaghetti a la Watson.
Candy Matson, the girl all San Francisco claims to know personally. That's because she hits the front pages of the newspapers more often than the Three Bridges. Kate, you came in late. Candy makes a tidy little living by minding her own business. The business being one of private investigation. Take this deal with Rembrandt Watson and Eric Spaulding. It sounded innocent enough to start with. A clue here, a corpse there could make a very interesting story. One that Candy Matson can tell you about herself right now.
What did the man say? A clue here, a corpse there? Well, he's almost right. The corpse came first, the clue later. I also ran across the most ingenious device ever dreamed up to cause a man to lose his job. And I managed to get a little culture on me, whether I wanted it or not. Because in the course of this little deal, I got better acquainted with Mozart, Brahms, Beethoven, even Khachaturian. Bless you. It all began by accepting Rembrandt's invitation that night for dinner and a meeting with Eric Spaulding. For the sake of the musician, I climbed into a gown that made music as I walked. It was cut trimly on the grace notes and called for a reprise every other bar. Then I put on my coda and went over to Rembrandt's place on California Street opposite old St. Mary's.
Candy girl, welcome to Menard Hill, Lamisere.
Thank you, dear.
Come in, come in. Breathtaking. Positively breathtaking.
Thank
you. You look gorgeous in that, what is it, Candy?
If you just stop and consider the thousands of man-hours put in by little worms all over mulberry bushes, you wouldn't ask that question.
Oh, silk.
Mm-hmm. Where's the maestro?
Oh, Eric hasn't arrived yet. He'll be here shortly.
What's his problem, Ducky?
I haven't the slightest idea, but he seems terribly upset. His worry seems to concern itself with his concert tomorrow night at the Opera House.
These boys with the long hair and coattails to match, they're always worrying. I don't know how most of them manage to live so long.
Oh, help yourself to the port, dear. I had some hors d'oeuvres, but Henry, the Great Dane, beat us to them.
Henry, heavens. I haven't seen him in ages. How is he, dear?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked, Candy. He's missed you terribly. I'll let him in for just a moment.
Oh, no, Rembrandt, I didn't mean that.
He's missed you so, dear.
Oh, Rembrandt, he's charging me. No, Henry, no. Rembrandt, help. He's got his paws all over my brow.
Isn't that sweet? Such devotion. Candy adores you.
Well, tell him to do his adulation from the floor with all four paws on it. Quick, Rembrandt, I'm becoming pigeon-chested.
What a beautiful picture.
Rembrandt.
Mm? Oh, yes. Henry, down, sir. This instant. There we are.
Now I know how that mud shoal in Chesapeake Bay felt when the big mole landed on it.
Into the kitchen, Henry. Back to your side of beef. That's the lad. Oh, that must be Eric.
Or another Great Dane.
Eric, dear boy, do come in.
Thank you. Oh, what a charming place, Rembrandt. So bohemian.
That's one word for it. Personally, I call it cluttered. Candy, dear, may I present Eric Spaulding, Eric Candy Matson.
How do you do? Really quite an honor, Mr. Spaulding. I've heard many of your European recordings.
Is that a fact? Yes, I had a very good orchestra in London. Nice chaps all. Played well together.
I used to know the producer on the Standard Hour. That way I became quite familiar with the playing of the San Francisco Orchestra. How do the two compare, Mr. Spaulding?
That's like trying to compare the Atlantic Ocean with the Pacific. Both large bodies of water, but entirely different in characteristics. However, I feel the San Francisco organization would rate among the best in the world, with the proper conducting.
And you feel you can give it the proper conducting?
Most certainly.
I see.
Why don't you tell Candy about your innovation in music, Eric? I'm sure she'd be greatly interested.
Oh, yes, I'm surely.
It's nothing more nor less than applied showmanship, Miss Matson. I've always had the firm belief that music should paint a mental picture.
I imagine the composers did, too.
So I've made it a point to always include one number in my concerts where we play in fluorescent lighting.
Oh, yes, I recall reading an article in Life about that.
I've been severely criticized for it. I conduct with an illuminated baton. To me, the musical message is much better presented in that manner. The audience sits in the dark. It has a chance to interpret what the composer intended saying.
Could be.
I've been accused of everything from cheap theatricals to degrading the concert stage. But I'm sticking with it. I'm convinced the public appreciates what I'm trying to do.
Rembrandt tells me you're bothered about something, Mr. Spaulding.
Yes, I am. I'm an artiste, Miss Matson. I know only one thing, music. That's why I wish to speak to someone in your line, investigating and that sort of thing.
That sort of thing leads to money.
I know. And I'll be very glad to retain you, if you can help me find out what I want to know.
And that would be?
Someone is trying to sabotage me, Miss Matson. The San Francisco concerts are critical stepping stones in my career. I've given 2 concerts. Each time, during the selection, where we black out the lights, the orchestra, en masse, has hit one foul, rotten chord.
Didn't you get it straightened out in rehearsal?
That's just it. It never happened in rehearsal. I've checked the score afterward. Perfect. I've talked to the orchestra personnel. They're more amazed than I.
To say the least, it must be extremely embarrassing at a moment like that.
Believe me, words haven't been invented to describe such a feeling of mortification. The audience starts to titter, then laughs. By then, the whole thing has been shot to blazes. My reputation is at stake, Miss Matson.
I see what you mean.
I thought perhaps with your trained sleuthing instincts you might be able to help me. My old friend Rembrandt here recommends you highly.
Thanks, old friend here. You've got me interested, Mr. Spaulding. When did you say your next performance is?
Tomorrow night at the Opera House.
Tell you what. I don't know what your contract calls for, but whatever it is, we'll split the fee and I'll go to work for you.
What? Why, that's preposterous.
Isn't the future of your career worth it, Mr. Spaulding?
Why, Very well. I think it's outrageous, but what can one do?
Okay. Now, when do you rehearse for tomorrow night's concert?
Tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock.
Very well, I'll be there. Just one word of caution. Pay no attention to me whatsoever. Make like as if I don't even exist.
Agreed.
Oh, I'm so glad everything's settled. Now we can get to the spaghetti rasson. Me food is practically chafing at the dish. Let's have absolutely stuff, shall we?
The spaghetti wasson was magnificent. Rembrandt has the green thumb for taking the most ordinary food, adding a bird's nest or two and a dash of some witch's potion, and making it taste like ambrosia. There was only one drawback. For days after, you walked around like you had a red-hot barbecue pit in your stomach. I stopped off on my way home, bought a chronicle, completed the journey, and piled into bed. Then I read the paper, missed Kane, caught DeRoos, glanced at the radio column, and then concentrated on the musical section. There it was, Spaulding's concert for the following evening. The first movement from Brahms first, the Fountains of Rome, the Rienzi, so on and so forth, and for his blackout selection, Swan Lake. With that, I dozed off, and before I could pick up the remnants of a dream I'd had the night before, it was morning and I was dressing and on my way to the Opera House.
Just a moment, young lady. You're not with the orchestra?
No, I'm here on official business for Mr. Spaulding.
Oh, sure. Go right on in.
I passed through the stage door and onto the stage itself. Just as I did, a little faraway thought started tickling the back regions of my brain. Spaulding. By a strange quirk, there was a gal who plays first flute in the orchestra named Spaulding. I worked my way around to where the musicians were unpacking their instruments. There she was, the gal herself. Hello there.
Oh, hello. How are you?
Fine, thanks. You don't remember me, do you? I'm Candy Matson.
Oh, yes, the young lady detective. You used to drop backstage now and then to the standard broadcast.
That's right.
Nice to see you again.
Thank you. What's this I hear about the orchestra falling on its face the last 2 concerts?
It's an amazing thing, Miss Matson. We're at a complete loss of words for an explanation. I understand it's front-page news all over the country.
And why not? A thing of this sort is news.
Eric's fit to be tied, of course.
I can't blame him. Incidentally, I just happened to think, isn't your name Spaulding, too?
I beg your pardon?
I said, isn't your name Spaulding, too?
Why, yes, it is. We spell it differently, however.
Oh, so?
Yes. Eric spells his name Spaulding. I have no U in my name.
Mm-hmm. You both have a decided British accent.
Oh, you think so? I rather thought I'd lost mine.
No, hardly. Tell me, how do the members of the orchestra feel about these numbers played under fluorescent light?
Well, it doesn't bother them. They think it's slightly silly, but they don't pay any attention to it. Each conductor has his own little idiosyncrasies.
I see. Well, I hope you have a fine rehearsal, Mrs. Spaulding.
Miss Spaulding.
Oh, yes. Miss.
You're going to be around for the concert this evening?
I believe so. I find it becomes more interesting all the time. Something was phony with the gal, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I tossed it off and decided to think about that angle later. In the meantime, I ducked into a quiet corner of the wings and listened carefully to the whole rehearsal. Then it came time for the blackout number, Swan Lake. It went beautifully, without a hitch. At the finish, Eric mopped his moist brow and spoke to the orchestra.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. You all know what has happened in these particular spots. The rehearsal this morning has gone beautifully. I thank you. I hardly think I need to remind you that tonight's concert will be critical, to say the least. If we repeat what has happened in the past two performances, I shudder to think what will be said of me and you as an organization. Will you all please pay a special attention to the score this evening for my sake, as well as yours? That is all, and again, I thank you.
With that, Spaulding dismissed the orchestra. I waited a reasonable length of time, then dropped around to his dressing room. The concertmeister was in with Eric, so I waited. And waited. Finally, he was alone. Or so I thought.
Oh, Miss Matson, come in.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Spaulding. I thought you were by yourself.
Oh, 1,000 pardons. Miss Matson, may I present Waldo Raimondi, my arranger?
Mr. Raimondi.
Pleasure indeed.
Now, there was something you wanted to talk about, Miss Matson?
No.
Oh, that's all right. I'm just pushing off.
Do that, will you, Waldo? And take care of that second bar after letter K. It should be an A natural.
No, Eric, not an A natural. It should be A flat.
Ah, yes, that's right. A flat.
Yes.
I'm so upset. Take care of it, will you, Waldo?
Righto. I'll see you back at the hotel. Very happy to have met you, Miss Matson.
Also, Mr. Raimondi.
Well?
Well, yourself.
I don't understand.
Neither do I. Let's both get with it. Are you acquainted personally with any members of the orchestra here?
Oh, in a vague sort of way.
How vague would your friendship with the first flutist be?
How did you know about her?
I didn't, but now you've told me. Almost. What about her?
I was hoping this would be kept quiet. She was my wife.
I had a hunch it was something like that. Could she have anything to do with your lack of grace notes?
No, not Nona.
Nona?
The former Mrs. Spaulding.
Well, we've got to start somewhere. She's as good a target as any.
I'm afraid you're on the wrong scent, Miss Matson. Nona and I had our differences. We split up. She came to America and joined the orchestra here in San Francisco. She's respected and admired. She wouldn't do anything to jeopardize her musical career, I'm sure.
But she might yours. Have you cut up any old capers since you've been here, Mr. Spaulding?
No, we haven't spoken. It's an unwritten rule we've both observed.
This has the same aroma Monterey has during the sardine season. Well, I'll keep plugging away. Good luck on the concert tonight. You need it. The hotel where Spaulding and Company made its headquarters was just a hop, skip, and a jump from the Opera House. But I would have looked silly getting there that way, so I drove. A simple question produced results. Waldo Raimondi was in room 1812. And before I could ponder whether that was from the overture of the same number, I was there.
Come in, please. Oh, hello. Come in, won't you?
Thank you. I hope I'm not disturbing you.
Oh, no, not at all. Seems we have a music lover in our midst. However, don't you think Eric might resent this little visit? Why, you little...
Cut it, Raimondi. You're lucky I only slapped your face. I'm here on business only.
Get out of here.
Not yet, small time. I want to have a little talk with you.
Who do you think you are, walking in here and making demands of me?
The name is Miss Matson. That doesn't mean anything to you, I'm sure, but I happen to be a private investigator.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't think that... You will forgive me, won't you?
I'll call a meeting of the board and let you know. I've got a couple of questions to ask. Give me the right answers and we'll both save time.
Gladly, if I can.
How long have you been with Spaulding?
Almost 17 years.
Did you know that the first flutist here was once his wife?
Yes. We don't talk about it. Neither do we talk to her.
What about this studied confusion that's occurred during the last two concerts?
It's most incredible. None of us can understand it.
No, none of us. Doesn't it strike you that a whole symphony orchestra just couldn't possibly go sour unless the whole symphony orchestra had agreed?
Or unless the score was wrong. But that couldn't be it either. Both Eric and I have checked immediately afterward, and that leaves us...
Nowhere.
Exactly. I have only one further suggestion.
And that would be...
Get better acquainted with Nona Spaulding.
What do you mean by that?
You're a private investigator, Miss Matson. Why not apply the tools of your trade?
The whole thing was becoming as simple as hydrogen. Using my cool Sam Spade logic, I decided to do nothing until after the concert that evening. So I went home to my penthouse on Telegraph Hill, showered, and slipped into something movie writers would have described as... comfortable? Then I called Rembrandt on the phone.
Rembrandt Watson Studios.
This is Candy Matson, Private Eyeball.
How delightful. We both got to plug in.
Yes.
What's on your mind now?
You, dear. How would you like to attend the Spaulding concert tonight?
Oh, Candy, I've heard music before.
So have I. But this is more or less a command performance.
I recognize the command in your voice. Very well. Shall I dress?
It's customary, isn't it?
I mean, how would you like me? In soup and fish?
No, Ducky, I've seen your soup and fish. It's covered with soup and fish. No, just come as you are.
Oh, Candy.
Very well. As you say, dress. I'll pick you up about 7:30.
Splendid. Where are we sitting? The Diamond Horseshoe?
That's right. Backstage in the wings. I bustled about getting ready. As long as I was going to be backstage, I didn't have to get too fancy. So in practically nothing flat, I was out in the car and once again driving over to Rembrandt's place. He was ready, he jumped in, and we took off for the Opera House. The carriage trade was arriving at the carriage trade entrance, so I found a place to park out in back, and then we went in, talked to Wally, one of the stagehands, and got 2 chairs on the left. Just at that moment, the concertmeister gave the cue for the orchestra to tune up. That was Spaulding's cue to float out from stage right and make his entrance. He carried more ham per pound than you'd find in the Chicago stockyard. He minced to the podium, bowed, scraped, and faced the orchestra. It all started nicely enough, even though the orchestra was playing as if it were sitting on eggs. First the Brahms, then Fountains of Rome. They took a bath in the first fountain. It felt so good they went on to another. Then another, and they were through all the fountains. Now it was time for the production number. The lights dimmed. The fluorescent lights on the music stands came on. Spaulding flipped a switch and his baton lit up. You could feel a tenseness come over the audience, and the orchestra started hatching its eggs. Eric gave the downbeat, and Swan Lake was underway. Everyone seemed to feel that the worst was over. You could almost hear the snapping of spines as the audience relaxed and settled back in their seats. And that's when it happened. It had happened again. The most horrible-sounding chord I'd ever heard. The audience stood up. This time there were no laughs, just a stunned amazement. The orchestra stopped playing, and Spaulding threw his baton on the stage and walked off into the wings. Slowly, the orchestra followed. I was just as dumbstruck as the rest. Then I got my wits about me and ducked around to the rear. Come on, Rembrandt.
To where, girl?
Anywhere. I want to talk to people, find out what happened.
Don't you know? They blew a king-size clinker.
Oh, that was well established. It'll be heard round the world. But I want to find out how it happened. Uh-oh. There's Spaulding talking to Raimondi.
I'm ruined, Waldo, through. Washed up. How can this sort of thing happen? How can it possibly happen?
Oh, look, Eric, calm down. It's not as bad as you're making it out.
I'm not making anything out. I'm facing the facts. I'm through. Do you suppose I can face the critics, the public, after 3 successive performances like this? Oh, there you are, Miss Matson. A lot of help you've been. You let it happen again.
Cool off, Buster. You can't avoid something happening when you don't know what that something is. This is a something that's never been written into the books. Or wait a minute. Hasn't it? All of a sudden, I've got me an idea.
Great heavens! By all the prophets, what's going on here tonight?
If you'll forgive my sudden departure, I intend finding out. We made like the cavalry going up San Juan. The scream had come from off stage over in the dressing rooms. That's where we headed. By the time we got there, a crowd had gathered. And there, in room 14, with her flute clutched firmly in her hands, lay Nona Spaulding. I'm going to try and get through here and find out what's happening. Excuse me. Pardon me.
How is she, Candy?
She's not feeling well, Rembrandt. As a matter of fact, she isn't feeling at all. She's dead. This was the kind of development I hadn't counted on at all. An orchestra coming apart like wet tissue paper is one thing, but murder is another. That's where my friend Inspector Mallard comes into the picture. I made a call to headquarters, but he was out. So instead, a couple of his boys came over. I left the entire thing in their capable hands and tried to clear up a little unfinished business of my own. You still play the cello, Rembrandt?
Strictly for my own amusement, Dove. Why?
Well, you know music. Take a look at the score. Right about here.
Yes. This is just about where they hit that foul chord.
That's right. Notice anything wrong?
Let me see. This bar looks all right. And so does this one. They didn't get past this point.
Look carefully.
Why, yes. Little indentations alongside the notes.
Ever so slight, but there, nevertheless. The pattern is beginning to take shape, Rembrandt. And if you'll look again, you'll find these little irregularities throughout the whole score.
Candy, you're right.
Now's as good a time as any to find out if I'm right or not. Wally! Wally!
Is that you, Candy?
That's right. Do me a favor, Wally. When I shout now, switch on the fluorescent lights, will you?
Okay.
Now hand me that score, Rembrandt. We'll place it on the music stand like this. Good. Keep your eyes on this bar right here. Don't look away for one instant. Now, Wally.
Okay.
Watch now. There are the lights. What do you see?
Candy, incredible. That chord changed right before my very eyes. Why, nobody could play that. It has dissonance over dissonance.
That's what you heard tonight. Keep watching. The regular lights again, Wally.
Right, Candy.
There. You see? Back to normal again. But you don't see the bad chord, do you?
No. This is amazing.
Most amazing. The copyist used a certain kind of ink that vanished under the fluorescent lights. And at that time, a whole new score appeared, with that awful chord buried in it. Diabolical, isn't it?
Yes, isn't it? Too bad you're so clever, Miss Matson.
Hi, Raimondi. I wasn't sure for a while, but when Mrs. Spaulding got it in the dressing room, I had my money on you.
It's a shame your knowledge won't do you any good. You're not going to be able to use it. You see, here in my pocket, a very competent 38. Now move, both of you, quietly, over to Eric's dressing room.
You better do as the man says, Rembrandt.
Oh, there you are, Miss Matson. I want
to... Oh, no, you don't, Eric.
Spaulding, you all right?
Yes, I'm all right. Just nick me.
Come on, Rembrandt. He's ducking around backstage. There he goes. He's trapped and he knows it. The cops are over on the other side of the stage.
He's coming back this way.
Rembrandt, the stage has been raised on the elevators. He's going to run right into that opening. Raimondi, look out! Raimondi! How do you feel, Spaulding?
A little weak. Just hand me a spot of that brandy, will you? I shall be all right.
Sure. Tell me, why was Raimondi gunning for you?
Until tonight, I didn't know he was.
All of a sudden, that name Raimondi means something to me. Here's your brandy.
Thank you. Yes, Waldo was a very promising violinist. Great things had been predicted for him until the summer of 1933.
What happened?
We were driving through Sussex when my car overturned. His left hand was badly smashed. Had to have the last 3 fingers amputated. That was the end of his career. First he was bitter, wouldn't speak to me. Said it was all my fault. Little by little, I won him over. Then, because music was his world, I gave him a position of companion and librarian. He's been with me ever since.
Yes, plotting your downfall. And very cunning, too. He waited all these years to pull the switch on his clever device.
Why is that, Miss Matson?
Your wife, Spaulding. Raimondi had it figured out that you'd attach all the blame to your ex-wife.
Poor Nona. Gone. And Waldo, too.
Yes. And all because that accident left a bigger scar on his mind than it did on his hand. Well, I'll see you, Spaulding. That was some concert tonight. It seemed to have just about everything. It was too bad about the ex, Mrs. Spaulding. She let her heart rule her head. She went to Raimondi's dressing room to make an overture, to perhaps make an effort to patch up her lost romance with Eric. She walked in at a bad time. Raimondi was applying the finishing touches to his phony score. There was an assortment of ink all over the table. At the time, it didn't mean anything to Nona, but during the performance, she discovered the same thing I did. After that bad chord, she rushed off stage, ready to apply the crusher to Waldo. He saw what she was up to and beat her to it, with a window weight over the head. Well, like I've said many times, some of that music gets too deep for me. I think I'll just stick to something not quite so complicated. Something simple, enjoyable, something you can understand, like bop, perhaps?
Listen again next week at this same time. For excitement and adventure, just dial...
Andy Matson, Yukon 28209.
Heard tonight were Hal Burdick as Eric Spaulding, Harry Bechtel as Waldo Raimondi, and Norma Tuart as Mrs. Spaulding. Jack Thomas plays the part of Rembrandt Watson. The program stars Natalie Masters as Candy and is written and produced by Monty Masters. Sound effects are created by Bill Brownell and Jay Rendon. Eloise Rowan is heard at the organ. The characters in tonight's story are entirely fictitious. Any resemblance to actual people is purely coincidental. Bill Walker speaking. The program came to you from San Francisco.
You are tuned for the stars on NBC.
Welcome back. Well, I actually like this solution to how the concert was being disrupted. I thought that was a pretty clever turn. Of course, her fee was extremely high, that 50% cut. But another solid episode for San Francisco, and even got in a little bit of a dig on Los Angeles with those smog remarks at the end of the show. Or I should say the beginning, excuse me. Also, I should note the episodes that were between last episode and this one. There was the Pat Ennis case, the Harvey Forrester case, the Neil Berquist case, the Ernest Mitt-Knott case, and the Flora Kirkland case. And next week we'll be turning back the clock a bit to the Candy Matson Christmas episode, Jack Frost, So we'll be looking forward to that. All right, well, now we turn to listener comments and feedback, and I received this question from George, who says, I really enjoy your shows. I'm old enough to remember listening to some radio shows, primarily Gunsmoke, when I was a child in the 50s. I got back into radio shows when I lived in the D.C. area, and a local public station would air Johnny Dollar weekly. My question concerns the availability of old radio shows. It seems most of those you and others put up are from the 1940s and 50s. Are these the only ones still in existence? Are there shows from the 30s and earlier available? Thanks again for the shows. I'll be listening for your answer. And George writing from Tarpon Springs, Florida. Well, thanks so much for the question, George. In answer, there are some shows available from the 1930s. We did play a few episodes. I think we got in a total of 4 episodes of Sherlock Holmes from the 1930s, including one with Rathbone and Bruce. Episodes of old-time radio shows existing before the 1940s are generally kind of rare. There are a few series that have a lot of exemplars out there. There's Fibber, McGee, and Molly, Lum and Abner. Not a whole lot of other programs, and of course neither of those shows are detective series. The only other detective series with a lot of episodes in existence that you could actually even do is The Misadventures of Cy and Elmer, which I didn't overall care for that much, which is why we won't do it on the show. And that's it. Most of the stuff you'll hear on this program from the 1930s will be episodes of the Lux Radio Theater. We did The Thin Man, for example, that aired back in 1936. And we'll be doing some others, including Ex-Mrs. Bradford. And then, of course, Mercury Theater. That's been a major source of our programs we've had from the 1930s. And we've got several. In fact, we'll be going back to the 1930s for an episode of the Campbell's Playhouse coming up, I think, in the next about 10 weeks or so. But it is pretty rare for anything in the detective genre to make it. One big challenge is many of the successful or even not all that successful programs in that era that had the detective plots were serial based. So if you don't have all the chapters in the serial, it doesn't do a whole lot of good. Mr. Keene, Tracer of Lost Persons, and Charlie Chan were 2 of the chief ones. And there are only a few recordings from the 1930s of these programs that are available. And they don't form complete story arcs. So they're not much use on the show. So that is the answer. We'll certainly keep our eyes peeled to see if anything else comes up. But, not a whole lot from before the 1940s. I would add that there is some old-time radio. When you get into the early 60s, you've got some episodes, Have Gun Will Travel, Johnny Dollar, Suspense, and then some of the early revival programs with Matthew Slade and also the ABC show Theater 5. All right, well, thanks so much for the question, George. I hope I answered it. If you do have a comment, send it to box13 at greatdetectives.net. Well, this episode of the Great Detectives of Old Time Radio is brought to you by the financial support of our listeners. Thank you so much for your support. We're now going to get into today's episode of Let George Do It, The Treasure of Millie's Wharf.
Personal notice, changes my stock and trade. If the job's too tough for you to handle, you got a job for me, George Valentine. Write full details.
Company of California, on behalf of independent Chevron gas stations and standard stations throughout the West, invites you to Let George Do It. The Treasure of Millie's Wharf, another adventure of George Valentine.
Dear Sir, Mr. Valentine. Dear Mr. Valentine! Oh, but what will I say? What will I write? How can I ever tell how exciting it is? This is the town of Millie's Wharf. Yes, Millie's Wharf. And, dear sir, my name is Millie. And as my fourth husband used to say... Shut up, you skinny, cockeyed, brainless bird! Oh, now, did I hurt him, little feelings? Poor, dumb little parrot. Can't talk back. There, Cupid. Cupid! Shut up, you skinny, cockeyed, brainless bird! Dear Mr. Valentine! Nothing ever happens in Millie's Wharf. At least not since my last husband died, and that was years ago. Nobody of any importance lives here anymore, but here we are, situated on the historical old bay of Islands. Yesterday, when I was gone picking blueberries, my parrot, whose name is Cupid, and who steals things and whose wings ain't clipped so he can fly, stole something. I don't know where he got it or how, but it's a map. Here in this place where the Spanish ships used to come. And on the map is a mark. But why would anyone put a mark at a place underwater? Yes, out behind one of the islands where it's easy to fathom. On this map, there are arrows and directions and a great big red X. Shut up! Oh, a map, Mr. Valentine, and something underwater, and an X to mark the spot.
Well, but it's only a torn piece of notebook paper, the kind you buy in a 5 and 10.
I know.
The red is just pencil, just ordinary pencil.
I know.
I certainly don't see anything to get excited about in just a...
Mr. Valentine, why should anyone draw such a map?
Well, to locate a shoal, maybe. You said it was shallow out there.
20 or 30 feet, but no.
Maybe somebody wanted to remember a place to anchor.
Hasn't been a ship in the bay bigger than a snipe since my second husband went to the bottom in a lumber scow. Exciting, ain't it?
Now, look, Millie. So your bird wanders around the wharf picking things up. So he gets a piece of paper with scratches and arrows.
Azimuth readings, compass bearings, so whoever drew it could find the place marked X again.
Oh, that's the way it looks, but...
Now, Mr. Valentine, tell me, why would anyone draw such a map, huh?
Oh, maybe somebody was out fishing and lost his wristwatch and wanted to mark the place, that's all. Just because there's a lot of legends about this bay.
There are ships sunk here, lots of ships. In this book. Now, when Henry Morgan sacked the city of Panama in the year 1600-something, there were Spanish ships that fled to the north. And lots of them big galleons was just simply loaded down to the gunwales with...
Hey, Millie, look, I've heard how the suckers used to come flocking to this place looking for buried treasure.
And so did you, didn't you? The minute I wrote the letter, just 'cause I need the help of a red-blooded man who...
I came here to tell you not to spend time and money trying to get in on whatever somebody else has already found.
There now. You said it yourself. Somebody's found something. That's what the X is. Somebody's found something and marked the place so they could come back. But we're going to beat 'em to it. You and me, Mr. Valentine.
What?
It's finders keepers, ain't it? So here's what you do. Now, there's a long drink of water, owns a little store and hotel down the road. Now, his name's Uriah James, and he's about as wide awake as a barnacle. But he owns a little rowboat, you see? Only one around here, and he never uses it. But you're going to borrow that boat, and we're just...
Wait a minute. Slow down, Millie.
Huh?
You mean you expect me to row all the way out just to take a look at that place marked X on this silly piece of paper?
Oh, you row fast, 'cause now I'll show this bird, the parrot. Come on in here.
You what?
Been bandaged and put in a cage ever since I come home and found him last night. Oh, yes, I had to. My poor little Cupid who stole the map. Only look at him, Mr. Valentine, at his wing. Now, you're not going to tell me that X isn't exciting and important when the same day he was innocently stealing the map, my poor little bird got a hole in his feathers. Yes, somebody shot at Cupid with a gun.
How about leaks, Mr. Valentine?
But it's been used lately, Mr. Jenks. I noticed...
Leaks like a sieve. Man practically drowned.
What man? When was this?
Man who used it, naturally. Wouldn't be anybody else.
All right, but will you tell
Now,
me?
my advice to you is to stay away from that Millie woman. Her and that nuisance bird. Good advice for any man.
But, Mr. Jenks, we want to know who it was.
Man, that's all.
Man who... Oh, go on. Let's hear some more.
Just rented it for the day. Come in the night
But
before...
where did he take the boat? I mean, George, he might have been the one who went out and
He
drew
bought
that map.
some red pencils. I know that much.
Huh? That's him, all right. Now, look, what's his name?
Come in night before. Yes, sir. Windy night it was. I remember that. Just a man. Short he was. Stocky. Just sort of there he was at the door. Middle of the night.
But didn't you ask him anything about
Spent
himself?
the next day out in the boat. That's all I know.
Oh, brother. First it's a parrot with a map, and now it's a mysterious stranger in the middle of the night.
Leave well enough alone, I say. What's mysterious? The man's name was Laver. Dr. Laver. You know how I found that out? He signed my register. See?
Emil Laver.
And you know where he is now? On his way to catch a bus out of town. Why should you interfere? Nothing to get excited about. Forget him. Forget the whole thing.
Well, this must be where the bus driver meant, Angel.
Yes. There's the water tower over there.
Where he dropped Laver off, 12 miles from town.
Only there's nothing out here, George. Just sand dunes.
This part of the shore is closer to the little islands, though. Sure. Look, here's the tracks where the bus stops.
And the tracks of a man, George.
Huh? Tracks of Laver. Come on, they cut across the sand.
Well, at least he doesn't have a wooden leg, does he? But I bet he has a patch over his eye or a
Brooksy, there's a
bandana.
perfectly logical explanation for all this Robert Louis Stevenson stuff. That's why I want to find Laver before I go galloping out after an ex.
What is it? This logical...
I don't know. I'll ask him.
Look, there's the water.
Yeah.
And his footsteps. So you're going to ask him, huh? They just walk right out into the ocean.
Oh, now, wait a minute. They can't just... Hey, Brooksy, look. Up the beach there, see?
Man.
Yeah, and they're working at something. Hey, stay here, will you?
But, George...
Hey, where are you going?
Wow. Hello there, friend.
Sure, I'm everybody's friend. Where are you going?
Oh, just out for a walk, Skipper? What's it to you?
When a man is bigger than you
Oh,
are...
lay off that. I was looking for a guy named Dr. Laver.
Huh? Look someplace else.
Why? You're off a ship, aren't you? Laver's tracks go down to the water there. Well, who picked him up in a small rowboat? You?
Oh, now look, friend, don't be so smart. Just go away.
Now you got a crew of men working up the beach.
Yes. Of course I picked him up several hours ago. So what? Now he's out on my ship, and those men are loading water for my ship. Isn't that exciting?
Well, it might be.
And it might not. Goodbye.
Might even be worth shooting a hole in a parrot.
What?
Tell me, is your friend Laver the kind of guy who draws maps? Does he go around putting X's on...
I told you when a man is bigger than...
Oh, get off it, Buster.
My friend, it's too bad you're so curious.
George, look out!
Oh, wait a minute.
But they just went off and left you, George. And you wouldn't wake up. They loaded water tanks into a boat and headed out for their ship. Wherever that might be.
Around this next island, lady.
Yeah, sure, Mac. Hey, can't you crank a little more speed out of this outboard?
Well, we're doing all right. Turn in just a second. Daylight now.
George, it's crazy to go banging right back out here.
I'm all right, Brooksy. I tell you, I'm fine. I just slept through a couple of reels, and I want to catch up with that captain.
But why? He's still bigger than you, and nothing has actually happened that you know he's mixed up in.
Well,
anything.
maybe I just want to see that X underwater.
And to see the ship as soon as we get out of the line of those trees.
How do you know exactly where this boat's anchored?
Well, because I come out during the night, that's why.
The night?
What?
Yeah, I'll hire up for anybody, mister. Millie and that sleepy colored Jenks over in Millie's Wharf. So what did you think I was doing over there with my outboard anyway? They gave me a call. I brought them both out here and then left him.
Rather, I did miss a lot, didn't I? Half the feature.
There it is, George.
Yeah, that's her. Nice tub, ain't it?
Yeah. And with practically everybody on board now, huh? Say, what's all that funny rig, you know?
Oh, not sure. Diving, I think.
Diving?
Oh, I don't mean real deep-sea stuff. But there's lines running down there, see? And, well, that's the pump on deck.
George, so it is a treasure
Hey,
hunt.
look, somebody's been below just now, just coming up. Look, a skinny guy in a helmet, see?
Yeah. I wonder what he found down there. I wonder what the X really is.
Look! I found it. It's there. Emil, where are you? Lave out.
Hey, wait a minute, friend.
Oh, of course. Of course. So glad to have you aboard, Mr. Valentine. Oh, excuse my trunks, Miss Brooks. You see what I'm diving.
Let's see what you found, Professor Schmidt. That's what interests me.
Yes, our last trip we should get it. Down amongst those rocks, I knew we would. They're dangerous. They're so big. Look. You see?
George, look what he was diving for. A lobster.
Oh, no, Miss Brooks. No, not just a lobster, a type of crayfish. Yes, certainly, but up and down this coast we have chased, looking but never finding this exact specimen.
You mean that's what you're here for, crayfish?
Hey, what did you get? Look at him, Emil. Isn't he a beauty? Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Permit me. Dr. Emil Lever, Miss Brooks, Mr. Valentine.
Hello.
Emil is the other half of our little expedition.
Expedition?
Yes, he's the marine botanist. Crustaceans are my specialty.
Harry, I think Mr. Valentine had a little different idea about our mysterious presence.
Huh?
Yeah, I've talked to that old harpy, that Millie.
Oh, yes, that nonsense. Yes, I know. Oh, but now see here, Emil, I found another one of those.
What?
Mm-hmm. I haven't scraped the stuff off. Now, wait a minute. There. M-L... Well, anyway, it's the year 1600 something.
It's a coin.
Yes. Rather interesting, isn't it? Minted by the Spanish, I should say. I think it's called a doubloon.
Oh, now, wait, let's get this straight. You guys are a scientific outfit, but you turn up Spanish coins. You make a map with an X on it. Now tell
Valentine, please, there's an explanation.
And the captain of your boat takes a poke at me. Let's get him in on this explaining, too.
Of course, be patient.
I suppose he's one of the eager beavers who jumped to the rail the minute that word doubloon came out.
He's somewhere, perhaps in his cabin.
George, there's the captain. There's enough light so that you can see now. X marks the spot, all right.
What?
In the helmet. See, the helmet underwater. He's down there, George, down on the bottom, only the way his arms are moving, he looks more like he's dead.
We'll return to tonight's adventure of George Valentine in just a moment. One of these evenings, you may have some friends over for canasta. Comes midnight, and you want to drive them home. But what's this? First, your car is hard to start. Then it kind of hiccups down the avenue. It has no pep in traffic, and it pings on hills. Better your friends had walked than be embarrassed like this. But seriously, if your car does act like this most of the time, it may be the fault of gummy gasoline. Most raw gasoline contains impurities that form gum. Then the gum gets into the fuel line, carburetor, spark plugs. To avoid this trouble, depend on Chevron Supreme. It's the gasoline that's super refined to get rid of those impurities which could form gum. That's why Chevron Supreme gives faster starting, smoother pickup, ping-free power on hills. And that's why folks say Chevron Supreme gives them that new car feeling. Try super refined Chevron Supreme in your car tomorrow. Get it at standard stations and independent Chevron gas stations where they say and mean, we take better care of your car. And now back to tonight's adventure of George Valentine. You go to the town of Millie's Wharf. You meet a parrot that someone shot at. You meet a woman who is all excited over the idea of Spanish treasure and sunken galleons. You meet two scientists who seem to be a good deal more interested in the discovery of a new type of lobster. But if your name is George Valentine, the one person you met whom you'd like to meet again is the captain of the scientist's ship. The man who knocked you out and left you on the beach hours ago. Only now, in the water below you, the captain has just been found. He's wearing a diving helmet, but from his appearance, he's dead.
Grab these lines. Pull him up. Hurry now. Get that winch going. Oh, for heaven's sake, get that bird out of here.
Don't you touch Cupid. He's not doing anything, Mr. Smith.
Nothing much we can do, Mr. Valentine.
Oh, yes, there is, Labour. Come here, lady.
I'm just watching, that's all.
Keeping air in his air hole.
Let go of me.
Why did you come out here, you and that bird of yours?
But you just up and disappeared. And then Mr. Jenks said he'd seen this ship from driving up on the hill.
So the two of you hired a boat and came out, huh?
Well, I've just been sitting here waiting for daylight.
Sure, so you could see what they were diving for.
No, keep the air going. He may just be in trouble.
No, I already knew about the money. The Spanish treasure. Here, you see? After you'd gone, I got looking around, and Cupid had brought it back, and it was hidden in the...
Yeah.
You don't have to tell me. It's one of them pieces of 8.
Cupid's stealing things again, huh?
And that's why I'm here, and I'm going to stay until every last penny of it's brought aboard. I'll have you know my third husband owned a lot of property around this bay, and if I haven't got some legal rights to own a ship, then I might as well...
Join the gold rush, then. Hold hands with your friend Jenks.
With what? That spineless, sweepy-headed...
Oh, Skipper, will you? Any luck, Schmidt?
Well, the winch won't pull his line up, Mr. Valentine. The current seems to have snagged one of those lines.
Yeah, you could swing the boat around, Professor. Might be able to get a better pull from the other side.
Let's try it, Harry.
I'll try anything. Only step on it, will you? Get that guy up.
So strange. He never liked to dive. Laughed at us for doing it. He was lazy. Just a hired captain. When we could pay it.
He wasn't so lazy when he hit me. He'd already heard about that first doubloon, hadn't he?
I guess so. Professor Schmidt found it last evening. We joked about it. Meant nothing to us. Curiosity.
But it would drive a guy like the captain crazy. Look, didn't anybody know he was down there?
That's too early before dawn. He was eager, I guess. The pumps are automatic. You just take a helmet and go over the side.
Why did you draw that map, Dr. Laver?
What?
You did draw that map, didn't you?
Oh, that. Of course. I draw them all, 50 or 60 this summer. Here, I could show you.
Never mind. Just show it.
Oh, well, sometimes I go ahead of the others. A sort of reconnaissance. From our last place up the coast, I came down to this Millie's Wharf. I hired a boat. I found this place. It looked good. That map had nothing to do with, well...
Were these coins that drifted into the same place, huh?
Well, there's no ship sunk there. I know that. But, yes, things drift on the floor of the sea, perhaps. It's all the way around now, sir.
Those lines are foul. That's why we can't pull him up.
Hold it, Dr. Laver.
Down on those rocks. You see them? I've had that same trouble
Now,
myself.
what's the matter, Professor?
Oh, I'm going down now myself. His ropes are all tangled.
No, you were just down, Harry. I'll take a helmet.
Well, there are 2 of them.
That's right. You sit still, Professor Schmidt. Come on, Laver. I'll help you get the captain.
Well, it's easy enough, but if you're not experienced...
Come on, let's do a little diving.
George, can you hear me all right?
Yeah, sure. Feels a little silly being lowered like this. These weights on the sandals.
Well, the professor didn't want you to just climb down, but it's only 35 feet or so, he says.
I know. To me, it looks like 70. Boy, it's sure getting darker.
Can you see him yet, George?
Yeah. I'm dragging these lines. It's a little hard.
Well, don't get them tangled on the rocks like he did.
Now, just take it easy. This is so shallow you can kick the gear off and swim them.
The captain couldn't do it, could he? What?
I didn't say anything.
Wait a minute. George on the other phone. Dr. Laver says there's nothing wrong with the captain's line. Looks more like he fell and then they got tangled.
Yeah, I know. Laver's right beside me. He's pointing. Yeah, I can see. I think he's right, Angel.
George, you get there already? George?
Captain's dead, all right, Brooksy.
Oh.
I don't know what could have gone wrong. The air's still pumping into his helmet, but it's all crooked. Water got in, too.
You mean he drowned?
Yeah, I guess so. Nothing else wrong with him, though. Looks more like he fell, and that knocked his helmet cockeyed. Only I don't know how a man could fall underwater. It's all slow motion. Unless he was... Hey, Brooksy. Hey. What in the name...
That thing right away from there, Mr. Jenks. I didn't do anything.
Well, it's all right, George.
Oh.
It was the air intake, but it's all right.
Yeah. Oh, brother. Cigarette near the air intake, huh? Yeah, I heard Schmidt. I was going to say a second ago. I guess that's how it was done.
What?
How the captain was murdered, Angel. Yeah, you heard me, murdered. Only we'd never be able to prove it. Hey, listen. There's a pouch thing on the captain's belt. Yeah, Laver, I see him. 1, 2, 3. The captain was down here collecting them all right. 11 more Spanish doubloons. Brooksy.
Nothing to get excited about, Mr. Valentine.
Huh? Jenks. Hey, where'd she go? Put her on.
Man should stay in his element, though. Good advice.
Hey, look, Buster.
That's where you're staying. Below, I mean. Hope it don't get too cold for a while, Mr. Valentine.
Put that gun down. Put it down, I said.
For heaven's sake, Mr. Jenks. Never mind, Professor. It won't go off.
Uriah Jenks, I'm warning you.
Won't go off unless you open your mouth, Millie. Close it.
You worm-turning chiseler. You've got no more right to the premises.
Millie, I warned you. Any more of your chatter, and you'll have powder burns like that pesky bird of yours did. And if you don't shut him up, I'll get my aim better and hit him.
No, you're the one. You shot at him. Uriah Jenks,
Stop it, both of you.
That's what I say, miss. Words are a waste of thought. Can you hear me down there? Hello?
Of course, yeah. Harry, what's
Applies
going on
to
up
you,
there?
too. Just listen. We got a treasure now.
A few piddling coins.
We've stumbled into something may turn out to be bigger than Fort Knox. And all I want's an agreement, fair and square. Now's the time to make it. Now, isn't that reasonable, Mr. Valentine? Well...
George?
Valentine. Here, give me that phone. Valentine!
There he is on the surface.
Hey, throw me a line, will you? Hurry up.
No, here, I've got you. What happened? Oh, you got out of your helmet.
Here. Thanks. Yeah, it's like being thrown out of a jack-in-the-box, Angel. No, I'm okay. Well, hello, everybody.
Oh, George, this crazy Mr. Jenks.
He shot you with Mr. Valentine. He admitted it.
All right. He's got a gun. Leave him alone.
George.
Sure. Just hold it steady, friend. That's all. You know, I kind of like you, Jenks. You give me ideas.
Well, if that ain't...
So you shot at the bird, huh?
Nothing to be ashamed of in that. Pest stole that coin and the map from the rowboat the other day. Seen him do it.
You got the fever bad, haven't you?
Mr. Valentine, Laver is still down there.
Yeah, he's all right. On the phone, isn't he? Professor, how'd you guys get along with the captain? Somebody said you didn't pay him very often or something.
Oh, no. Well, we did owe him money. He was trying to get possession of the boat, but really...
I met the guy, not very pleasant, I can imagine. Here, let me have that phone.
Well, it doesn't have anything to do
That's
with...
not your idea, is it, Laver? Laver, can you hear me?
Of course. I will come back up to deck.
A helmet, couple of lines, and a phone. It'd be almost impossible for an able-bodied man to get in trouble down there. And he could always get out the way I did. Unless his lines were really tangled, which the captain's weren't. Let me have that cigarette.
George, you said the
If
air
you're
intake...
smoking, it's easy to make a man cough down there. Like this.
Hey, what is it?
Oh, I'm sorry, Doctor.
I'm coming on deck.
Oh, now there, that's better. But a cigarette isn't enough to kill a man, even if he choked and had trouble with his helmet. You have to stand up in one of those helmets, though, don't you? To really keep the water out.
Coming up.
You're not coming up. Not even the way I did.
What?
I was dragging the lines for both of us, remember? For the time being, you're with the fish, Buster. I tied your lines.
You're crazy.
I want to try a lot of things in front of this air intake. Maybe I can tell by the way you act what you used on the captain. Was it formaldehyde? Gasoline? Ether?
Valentine, what do you think you're
That's
trying...
how you killed him, wasn't it? How you made him pass out down there so he'd fall and drown? Fairly shiny coins, too, aren't they? Where'd you get them? A museum?
What are you talking
Well,
about?
a man couldn't dive down that deep from a rowboat and get a coin, could he? So where did the parrot steal that coin of his along with a map? Oh, and he's been bandaged ever since that day, so he couldn't have wandered around to steal it since then.
Valentine, please let me...
So if you had a coin that day, you didn't get it from the bottom of the ocean, you brought it here. You brought all of them here. Sure, and the map makes more sense that way anyway. You draw a map when you bury treasure, not when you dig it up.
I always do them. I told you. I located the...
Skip it. You salted the ocean like you salt a fraudulent mine. And why? To get that loud-talking captain who'd never do any diving himself down there. To sucker him into a spot where you could commit a perfect murder.
I didn't. Take that away from the intake.
Buster, you started a fake treasure hunt. But too many people got excited over Spanish doubloons. That's what trapped you.
Take it away. I can't breathe right when you...
Keep talking, friend. We'll be down to get you in a minute. But we'll haul up a confession first. No, Angel. There was no gold in that bay. Laver admitted it when he wrote his confession. Stole 13 doubloons from the collection up north.
Did he ever explain why he killed the captain, George?
Well, he hated the guy. The captain did have a lien on the boat. He was going to take it away from the hard-working scientists. And I guess that's all Laver lived for, puttering around on the bottom of the ocean.
But Professor Schmidt didn't have anything to do with it.
No.
George, wait a minute. You said the confession said 13 coins.
Yeah?
But as I remember, when we added them up, there were 14.
So?
Now listen. I mean, there really were Spanish ships in this bay, and... Well, where did the extra coin come from? Aren't you curious at all?
Definitely. Hey, say something, Cupid, not just X, X, X. What a...
Shut up, you shitty talker! I raised
When you go on a vacation, you usually plan on spending a certain amount of money. But here's a way to enjoy your motoring trip and save money at the same time. Before you start out, have your car's crankcase drained and refilled with RPM motor oil. First choice where driving's toughest. And have your car's oil filter inspected. By keeping grit and dirt out of your precision-built engine, the oil filter is a real money saver. But if you use clean, fresh oil with a clogged-up filter, it's just like throwing money away. Start your vacation trip with a new Atlas Micronic filter element, and you'll be money ahead with a cleaner engine. This low-cost Atlas Micronic filter element traps all the sludge, all the abrasives, right down to particles as tiny as 39 millionths of an inch. How about doing this tomorrow? Get an Atlas Micronic filter element at your standard station or independent Chevron gas station, where they say and mean, we take better care of your car. Tonight's adventure of George Valentine has been brought to you by Standard Oil Company of California on behalf of independent Chevron gas stations and standard stations throughout the West. Robert Bailey is starred as George with Virginia Gregg as Brooksy. Let George Do It is written by David Victor and Jackson Gillis and directed by Don Clark. Martha Wentworth was heard as Millie, Herb Butterfield as Jenks, Harold Deerenforth as Laver, Joe Duvall as the captain, Larry Dobkin as Schmidt, Dick Ryan as the man, and Bill James as Cupid. The music was composed and presented by Eddie Dunstetter. Your announcer, John Heaston. Listen again next week, same time, same station, to Let George Do It. This is the Mutual Don Lee Broadcasting System.
Welcome back. This was, I think, another just great example of a classic mystery. You've got the treasure map, and even a parrot thrown in for good measure. And also the drama of someone using the diving equipment of the era as part of their plot for foul play. I do wonder if anyone has ever tried anything like that with the air hose and diving equipment outside of the minds of mystery writers. Well, now we turn to listener comments and feedbacks. This one is an iTunes review. Typically, I listen every night before I go to bed, but tonight I can't get any of your podcasts to download. I've checked others, and they work just fine. And hopefully nothing is wrong, and they will be working soon. I can't wait to start listening again. Well, I'm sorry you're having that difficulty. There's no problem on this end with the podcast being available. It may be an issue with your particular connection or computer setup. There are things you can try, such as subscribing and unsubscribing from the podcast. And if on any day you're having trouble downloading today's episode off of iTunes, I encourage everybody just go to greatdetectives.net, where today's episode is always available for you to download. I would add, just to make sure that people are helped if they're having an issue, that leaving an iTunes review to point out a technical issue may not be the best way to communicate, because I can't get back to you. If you email me at box13@greatdetectives.net, or you go on Facebook and mention it, then I'm going to be able to respond to you pretty quickly. And I can say this is just a general issue with you, or I can realize there's a system-wide issue. Leaving that kind of information on Podcast Alley and iTunes ensures that about 8 days later I can answer your question on the show. But if you're not able to download the show, it's not going to help much. So just to make sure, if you do run into a technical issue, email. I'd strongly encourage that, rather than leaving a technical question on Podcast Alley or iTunes where I'm not going to be able to get back to you. And some reviews now from the Android market. It takes a while to get used to. I have the companion app Dragnet on my iPhone. Great old-time radio detective show. The presenter is quirky but very knowledgeable and enjoyable. Well, quirky I can definitely live with, thank you. And most used app Love Adams podcast shows are not scattered there in order from start to finish with 5 different detectives a week. Check the website. Thanks so much, and it's a good reminder. And finally, just a comment. I look forward to each broadcast. Thank you for keeping me company out on the job site. And that one is from Podcast Alley. All right, well, that will do it for today. We'll be back tomorrow with Sherlock Holmes. And be looking for a Bob Bailey app extra. We'll have that posted here. Well, this episode of The Great Detectives of Old Time Radio is brought to you by the financial support of our listeners. Thank you all so much for your support. Today's episode of Sherlock Holmes is called The Case of Sudden Senility. We'll go ahead and we'll take a listen.
From New York, the makers of Clippercraft clothes for men and 1,036 leading retail stores from coast to coast present the world's most famous detective, Sherlock Holmes. Our stories are based upon the character of Sherlock Holmes, created by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Sherlock Holmes is portrayed by John Stanley, Dr. Watson by Alfred Shirley, and the dramatizations are by Edith Meiser. Well, here we are once again, settled comfortably in front of Dr. Watson's cheerful fireplace. Outside, the winter wind wails like, well, let's see. What does the wind sound like tonight, Dr. Watson? A lost soul or a baffled banshee? What would you say?
To me, Mr. Harris, that wind sounds rather like Bast, the ancient Egyptian cat goddess, sometimes called Eubastis. She howls, they say, if anyone disturbs the graves of those who have consecrated themselves to her.
Oh, come now, Dr. Watson. You don't believe that sort of nonsense, do you?
Well, I'm not so sure, Mr. Harris. I'm not so sure. One violent autumn night, as Holmes and I crossed the wind-swept moors that surround King's Pyland, we heard such a cry, a strange, harsh ululation that struck a chill to our marrow bones, and... Oh, but good heavens, there I go again, forgetting my manners. After all, you have something rather important to say, I believe, Mr. Harris.
Well, I generally have, Dr. Watson, and speaking of wind and chill, there's nothing like a Clippercraft overcoat to keep them out, you know.
Right. Pity Holmes and I weren't wearing a Clippercraft that night on Dartmoor Heath.
Now, Dr. Watson, this is my part of the entertainment.
Oh, sorry, old man. Proceed.
Thank you. There are now 1,036 fine stores across the nation that sell Clippercraft clothes. That's a tribute to the efficiency of the Clippercraft plan. And that's a tribute also to the tremendous demand that an alert American public has built for Clippercraft. In the Clippercraft plan, you see, these 1,036 stores concentrate their buying power, effecting tremendous savings the year round in manufacturing and distribution costs. These savings are all yours, and it's a mighty nice thing to be able to outfit yourself with value so exceptional at your own local independent store, where you get real service and friendly personal attention. Clippercraft suits are only $40 and $45. Clippercraft top coats and overcoats only $40, And sport jackets, only $26.50. Seeing is believing. To convince yourself beyond a shadow of a doubt, simply compare Clippercraft with clothes selling for many dollars more. And now to return to that icy wind on the moors, Dr. Watson.
Well, as a matter of fact, Mr. Harris, that's not where this adventure had its inception. It was a brisk fall day rather early in the century. After a good deal of argument, I had persuaded Holmes to accompany me on a constitutional through Kensington Gardens. As our listeners doubtless know, Holmes was never a man who took exercise if he could avoid it.
Lethargic sort of fellow, eh, Dr. Watson?
Well, not necessarily. Needless to say, when we returned to Baker Street somewhere around 5, I was the one who was puffing like a grampus, while Holmes bounded up the steps as easily as a greyhound. We were met at the front door by Mrs. Hudson, the chatelaine and general factotum of our bachelor domain.
Ah, Mrs. Hudson, what's up?
It's way past your tea time, Mr. Holmes.
Oh, to blazes with tea, madam. Give us an early supper.
What's more, a gentleman was here. Waited upstairs half an hour, he did. Stamping up and down on my ceiling till I thought the chandelier would come loose.
Sounds like a client, eh, Watson?
Well, we could do with a case, Holmes. The exchequer is getting a bit low.
Bother the exchequer.
Oh, for heaven's sake, Holmes. Relax. We're home, you know.
He said he'd be back. If it's a case, see that he pays. Looks like he had money.
Yes, Mrs. Hudson's correct. Our late visitor undoubtedly had money.
Pity he got away. But what makes you think the blighter was affluent?
Can't you smell it? He smoked the very best tobacco. Aha, the matter he came to consult us about must have been urgent. He's left his pipe here on the table. A nice briar with a longish stem of what the tobacconists fondly call amber. Yes, he must have been thoroughly disturbed to leave behind a pipe he values so highly.
Oh, balderdash, how can you possibly know how he values his silly pipe?
Elementary, my dear Watson, elementary. The pipe has been twice mended, once in the wooden stem and once in the amber, each time with a silver band costing more than the pipe did originally. What's more, he's been here before because, having run out of his own mixture, he's helped himself to a pipeful from the Persian slipper on the mantelpiece. No casual stranger would know that's where I keep my tobacco. Oh, but here's his step on the stairs. Come in, come in.
Confound it, man. Why don't you stay at home where you belong?
Holmes, it's Colonel Ross.
Obviously, my dear Watson. Oh, bring our visitor a chair and a slight sedative of some sort, say a brandy and soda.
I don't need a brandy. Yes, I do, confound it, a double brandy.
Well, don't tell me you've had another disaster on the moors at King's Pyland.
We have that, Mr. Holmes, but this time it's not a man that's been murdered. It's a horse.
Worse. Much worse.
Let me tell you, there aren't many men the equal of Blazing Star.
Good Lord! Blazing Star! Isn't that your entry for the Wessex Cup, sir?
It was, Dr. Watson, it was.
Aha, Blazing Star. Watson was reading me an item about it just the other day. I believe he's the son of the famous Silver Blaze out of Lady Luck.
You were able to rescue his sire for me, Mr. Holmes.
In time to win the Wessex Cup. What a race that was, eh, Holmes?
But it's too late to do anything for poor Blazing Star. But by the Lord Harry, I mean to catch up with the scoundrel that killed her. And when I do...
I've always contended there's a special reservation in the lowest hell for any man who mistreats animals.
Yes, quite. But tell me exactly what happened at King's Pyland, Colonel Ross.
You remember Ned Hunter, Mr. Holmes? He was in charge of the stable at the time Silver Blaze was abducted.
Yes, fine fellow, reliable and trustworthy.
He's been promoted to the post of trainer since you last saw him, but he still sleeps in the stable, doesn't trust anyone else to do it.
Blazing Star, like his sire before him, was the favorite for the Wessex Cup, I believe.
That's right, Mr. Holmes. So Ned was being extra particular. None of the stable boys were allowed to go near the horse. Ned groomed and exercised him himself. No one else laid a hand on the animal.
Can't take too many precautions with a winner, eh, Holmes?
Don't interrupt, Watson.
Well, yesterday afternoon I went down to the stables myself to watch Blazing Star work out. I wish you could have seen him. The sunshine glinting on his chestnut coat. Like a fiery streak he was coming down the stretch. Never went better in his life. Well, I went into supper and cleared a place off the mantel. The same place we kept the Wessex Cup when Silver Blaze won it. Then I went to bed and slept the sleep of the just. But along about 2 o'clock in the morning, I was awakened by Ned Hunter. As I lit the lamp, I could see his face, white as a sheet, and his hand shook as though he had the palsy. Ned, what's up? What's the matter, man?
It's the Star, sir. He's took bad. Better go for the vet.
Good Lord. What happened? He seemed in great shape this afternoon.
I can't explain it, sir. Unless it was that cat upset him. You know how he always hated cats.
What cat? We don't keep any cats.
Well, a black cat it was, sir. Can't say I've ever seen it before.
But when I was taking in his bunch of carrots I always gives him before I tucks him in for the night, a black cat comes out of nowhere and slips into the store between my legs.
Good Lord.
Well, sir, you know how the Star is about cats. He started stamping and whinnying like he was possessed. Hey, you, Timmy, Joe, help me get this cat out of here before she's killed. Oh, easy, Star. Easy boy now. Easy, Star. Did you see that cat? Come out of here like a bat out of hell. Eyes blazing like the devil himself. Hello. She's raked the Star on the flank. She's drawn blood. Easy, boy. Easy. Hey, Timmy, bring the ointment. The Star's hurt.
Well, Mr. Holmes, Ned Hunter swabbed down the scratch and tried to quiet the horse, but Star was restless. Along about midnight, Ned noticed his breathing was getting heavy and labored. He'd worked up quite a sweat. Ned rubbed him down again, but he kept getting worse instead of better, so I went for the vet. He's a new man in the district and supposed to know all there is to know about animals. When I brought him back with me, Ned looked like he'd seen a ghost. Ned, this is Mr. Peebles, the new veterinary surgeon. He'll bring Star around for us.
I'm afraid the Star's past help, sir. I've never seen the like. Just seemed to collapse in front of my eyes. His back sort of sagged and his knees gave way. Pretty soon he couldn't stand up no more. He's lying in there on the straw, pretty near gone.
You'd better take Mr. Peebles right in, Ned.
Yes, sir. This way, sir.
Confound it. If anything happens to that horse. He was so fit this afternoon. Lord, it's quiet around here. If I could just hear the old boy breathing. 3:00. Where do you suppose that blasted cat came from? Ah, rubbish. No one dies from a cat scratch. Haven't had any cats around here for years. Certainly not any black cats. Well, Mr. Peebles, how is he? What's the verdict?
I'm sorry, Colonel Ross. He's gone, sir. Died very quietly. Of old age. You say the vet pronounced Blazing Star dead of old age, Colonel Ross?
But that's impossible, Holmes. The Wessex Cup is a race for 5-year-olds.
Exactly. Blazing Star was 5-year-old last month. Yet when I went in to look at his body as it lay there in his stall, I'd have sworn he was the oldest horse I'd ever seen. Temples caved in, coat dry and grayish, hip bones protruding.
You don't think anyone could have switched horses while Ned Hunter came to inform you the horse was taken sick?
No, Mr. Holmes, I'd no Blazing Star anywhere. The star on the forehead he'd inherited from his father. The white off forefoot and a long scar on his left hind leg where he'd cut himself in a bit of wire when he was a 2-year-old. That horse was Star, full 5 years ago last month. He couldn't have died of old age.
Fantastic and macabre story, eh, Holmes?
Quite. Many people, of course, will profit by his death. Have there been any strangers in the neighborhood of King's Python these last few weeks, Colonel Ross?
There has been a band of wandering gypsies camping on the moors.
Of course. Gypsies have many curious and little-known poisons. They'd be quite apt to keep a black cat, what's more. If its claws had been dipped in some obscure venom, they...
Possibly, Watson, possibly. Tell me, Colonel Ross, what's become of your erstwhile neighbor and rival, Lord Backwater, who owned the Mapleton stables?
That blackguard. Haven't seen him since the affair of Silver Blaze. He was ruled off the turf after that, you know, and forced to sell his horses.
Serves him jolly well right.
Mapleton has been unoccupied until recently. About a month ago, I understand it was leased to a professor, an Egyptologist, I believe. He's a recluse. Spends most of his time in a laboratory and fixed up for himself in the old study. Maddie Baxter, our maid sister, keeps house for him. Says he's a queer sort of a chap. Works behind locked doors all night and sleeps all day.
Unhealthy sort of life, eh, Holmes?
Yes, there are several factors around King's Python that don't sound healthy to me. Colonel Ross, I suggest that Watson and I take the morning train for Exeter to investigate the situation.
I hoped you'd say that, Mr. Holmes. I've told Ned not to dispose of Star's body until you arrive.
Splendid.
I suppose you'll want me to take my revolver, eh, Holmes?
Your revolver and that little black satchel that contains your medical kit. This, unless I'm very much mistaken, is a case in which we should be prepared for anything. Well, Well, Watson, now that you've finished a thorough examination of the cadaver, what's your verdict?
The vet was right, Holmes. The horse obviously died of old age.
But I tell you that's impossible. Blazing Star was only a little over 5 years old. Ned here will bear me out.
That's right, gentlemen.
Horse doesn't die of old age at 5 years.
It looks like Blazing Star ain't going to be the only one, neither.
Good Lord. Don't tell me another one of the horses has caught the malady.
It's not one of the horses, sir. It's the sheep. I noticed it when I went out to the paddock after you left this morning. They stood there all huddled together, shivering. Then gradually, all day long, they kept getting older and older. You could fair see 'em do it. Their eyes are rheumy, and their voices weak. And, some of them can hardly keep on their feet.
But those sheep were young. Most of them were dropped in this year's lambing season. What do you make of it, Dr. Watson? Have you ever heard of old age being contagious?
No, there have been isolated cases, Colonel Ross, where young and healthy individuals have developed a wasting away that rather resembled the appearance of age. However, I'd hardly think it possible.
Hold on. Who's this running across the moors in the sunset?
Looks like a woman. Her hair flying loose, her shawl flapping in the wind.
Well, she's staggering as if she were drunk.
It's Mattie, Colonel Ross. Her that works over at Mapleton.
She's not suffering from the effects of alcohol. It's fright that's upset her. It's sheer terror.
Colonel Ross! Colonel Ross! Will you take me in this night? I'm never going back. I'm never going back to that house again. I knew he was evil the minute I laid eyes on the man, and now I've seen him. He's a butcher, he is. He's a ghoul.
Who is Mattie?
My master. Him and at least Mapleton. He's filled the house full of heathen statues. The lower part man and the upper part beast.
Those would be the statues of the ancient Egyptian gods. Ra, the hawk, Anubis, the dog, and Bast, the cat, I fancy.
Bast, that's what he calls her. The black cat that rides everywhere with him on his shoulder. Their eyes are alike. Him and the cat's both green. And they both can look at you without even blinking. Only his head moves from side to side while he stares at you.
What's that?
I said his head. It don't never hold still. He's a ghoul, that's what he is. They've been bringing him boxes for weeks now. 6 boxes, big like coffins. A lorry drives up in the dead of night and they carry the box into his study and he locks the door behind it. That's the last anyone ever seen of them boxes or what's in them.
You've never seen any traces when you go in to clean the study?
I've never been allowed in, sir. No one's ever been allowed in that study except the man what brings the boxes, and then only for a minute while he puts them down. Today, the men come with another big box, only they brought it before it was dark. The master fell in a rage when he saw him drive up. When they brought the box in and set it down in the study, he was that worked up, there were flecks of foam on his lips.
You idiots! How often have I told you not to come here by daylight? Have a heart, Governor. The sun's about down and there's a storm coming up. Me and me partner have a long way to drive back to town. We don't like to be caught in the moors in a storm at night.
Oh, you don't? Well, this is the last time you need come here. People who work for me obey my orders.
Aye, but Governor...
Get your pay. Now, get out.
We'll be going. Never fear. He needn't have done that.
Oh, he's a terror when he gets in one of his rages.
Oh, there. You work here?
Aye, I'm the housemaid.
Know what it is he's got in them boxes we bring him?
Haven't a notion. That room's always kept locked.
Never so much as looked through the keyhole.
Oh, I'd never do that. It's not right.
Maybe not, but I bet it'd be interesting. Aye. Come along there, Chris, or we'll be caught on the moors out of dark.
Aye.
He's lit the lamp in there. It shows through the keyhole. He's taken the lid off the box. I can hear the nails squeak. I would sort of like to know what's in it. One peek wouldn't hurt, I guess. Hello. There's another box inside of the first one. It's got a painted face and hands. Now he's taken that lid off, too. There's something lying inside. It's got a face, too, and hands. Oh! It's a woman. She's dead. It's a woman's body.
Great Scott. A woman's body? Then the man is a ghoul, a body snatcher, or worse.
Unless I'm very much mistaken, he's much worse, Colonel Ross. As for the body, I imagine it's been dead a long, long time. Yes, I think Watson and I will take a stroll over to Mapleton later this evening. I'd like to take a look at the contents of that box myself.
What a night to go stalking about the moors, Holmes. I'm soaked to the skin.
Yes, the equinoctial rains seem to be especially vigorous this year, Watson.
Vigorous, I can hardly say. Good Lord, what was that?
That, I imagine, is a member of the feline or cat family.
Sounds half wild, eh, Holmes?
Yes, unusual for a cat to be out in this weather.
Seems to be getting closer.
Angle the lantern over here. Yes, there it is, in that tree to the left.
Good Lord. Its eyes shine like fire. Maybe she's caught up there and can't get down. Here, pussy. Nice kitty.
Watson, for the love of heaven, don't get near that cat.
Why not?
Because one scratch from her claws, and you would decline and die of old age.
You? Professor Moriarty?
You look surprised to see me, Dr. Watson. I heard you were expected at King's Pyland, Holmes, and when that stupid serving girl ran screaming out of my house this evening, I rather expected it wouldn't be long before you came over to Mapleton to pay your respects to the Princess Hatshepsut.
Princess Hatshepsut? So that's who you have in your latest mummy case, Moriarty.
Yes, in the most perfect state of preservation, but of absolutely no use to me, unfortunately.
Why not?
She was still slender when she died. The artisans who embalmed her didn't need to age the body to prepare it for burial.
Age the body?
Have you ever seen a fat mummy, Dr. Watson?
Come to think of it, can't say I have.
In ancient Egypt, it took upward of 70 days to prepare the body of a mummy. Rare gums, resins, and spices were used. And if the deceased was fat, a fluid was injected which aged and shriveled the body after death.
And it's your theory, no doubt, Moriarty, that same fluid extracted from those mummies would, if injected into human beings, produce premature old age and death.
So far, Mr. Holmes, I have only experimented with animals. But I believe the process has been sufficiently perfected so that I may now indulge in a few human experiments. How fortunate that you and Dr. Watson should have decided to drop in this evening.
Holmes, let's get out of here.
Not so fast, Dr. Watson. My servant Akbar has had you covered for some time. He's an expert shot, I promise you.
Bluff. Pure bluff. Can't see a soul.
Akbar is rather dark. He doesn't show up very well at night, but to prove to you he is present, I shall have him destroy the cat up there.
No, don't bother.
But it's no trouble at all. We came out here for that purpose. Unfortunately, yesterday I spilled some of the liquid I'm experimenting with, and the cat walked in it. It's no longer safe to have it at large. You saw the results when she scratched Colonel Ross's horse last night. You see, I don't want to kill people. I shall be satisfied just to make them senile.
You blackguard.
Don't excite yourself, Dr. Watson. Akbar, the cat. Such a pity. I was rather fond of the beast. Now, gentlemen, if you will accompany me.
When you're in your favorite clothing store these winter days and hear someone say, "How do they do it?" he's probably trying on a Clippercraft suit or overcoat. Because in this era of higher prices, it's really startling to see so much truly fine quality in clothes for such a modest amount. For Clippercraft suits are only $40 and $45. Clippercraft top coats are only $40, and sport jackets are only $26.50. The fabrics are really long-wearing. Style and fit is superb, because Clippercraft clothes are expertly designed. Now, you may ask how all this is possible. Well, the answer is real manufacturing genius and a plan. The famous Clippercraft plan concentrates the buying power of 1,036 of the nation's finest stores from coast to coast. Thus, you get the amazing advantages of the group buying at your own local independent store, at the store you can trust. Selling expensive clothes at inexpensive low prices at the nation's finest independent stores is the great big idea behind the Clippercraft plan. That's why men who know insist on Clippercraft clothes. So be sure to visit the Clippercraft store in your city.
These leading stores in the metropolitan area are proud to add their names to Clippercraft in your suit, top coat, and overcoat. In Manhattan, Saks 34th, Broadway at 34th. John Wanamaker Men's Stores, Broadway at 8th and 67 Liberty Street. In Brooklyn, Abraham and Strauss. In Newark, New Jersey, Boulevard Men's Shop, Kresge Newark. And in Jamaica, the B&B Clothes Shop, 16408 Jamaica Avenue.
now to return to Dr. Watson and Sherlock Holmes. We find them in Moriarty's laboratory.
Sorry I'm forced to have Akbar tie your hands to the back of your chairs, gentlemen. Akbar, if you will remove Dr. Watson's revolver from his right-hand pocket. That's it. No, you needn't take his satchel off his knees. I know how lost a doctor feels without his little black bag.
Very generous of you, Moriarty.
Not at all. That will be all, Akbar. You may leave the room and lock the door. And now for the Lady Hatshepsut. She's in the mummy case here. I thought you might enjoy the sight of a charming female while I give you the injection that will deprive you of your youth and vigor.
Now, look here, you... Don't argue, Watson. Is that by any chance, Professor Moriarty, the mummy case in which the Princess Hatshepsut was entombed?
I believe so. She was removed from the tombs of the royal mummies at Dar el-Bahari.
By those famous grave robbers, the brothers Abd el-Rasul, whose exploits finally led the British archaeologists to the left bank of the Nile opposite Karnak.
But how clever of you, Mr. Holmes, to be so well informed on Egyptian mummies.
Holmes knows everything. Or didn't you know?
Watson, on the other hand, while no mental mastodon, has hidden possibilities. Did you know, Professor, he once played rugby for Blackheath?
Fascinating.
I gather from the fact that the mummy case has the hands carved in relief that it dates from the 7th Theban dynasty.
You are absolutely correct, Mr. Holmes. Wait, I will raise the lid and permit you to see the lady herself.
Good Lord. She looks as if she had died yesterday.
Yes, Dr. Watson. The mummies of Memphis are black, dry, and brittle. But those of Thebes are yellowish, flexible, and so elastic that the flesh yields to the touch, and the limbs may be moved. So, without breaking.
Yes, it's remarkable. I should have liked to be present when they discovered the tomb at Dar el-Bahari. Imagine, Watson, there were 36 mummies, 20 of them kings and queens.
Suppose we dispense with any further lectures on antiquity, Mr. Holmes. I think the substance I have here in this little glass phial may prove even more fascinating.
How?
This is the liquid I've distilled from 5 previous mummies, the ones who have been, shall we say, aged. One small scratch with a pin dipped in this fluid should, if my calculations are correct, turn you both into old men.
What would be the object of that, may I ask?
Well, in the first place, it would render you no longer able to interrupt my activities. And in the second place, if my experiment is successful, I flatter myself I can change the course of history.
Interesting.
Think what would happen if I were to make certain men senile. The Kaiser, for instance, and that new American president, Roosevelt, Mr. Theodore Roosevelt. And there's a man over in France, Monsieur Clemenceau. And a young man right here in England, his name is Winston Churchill. I think history might be quite different if he suddenly became old and feeble-minded. Let me see. My tie pin should do very nicely.
Yes, a very interesting hypothesis, Professor Moriarty, but that phial is so small. Is that all the fluid you have?
It will suffice, Mr. Holmes. I shall prick only the key men. Now then, I'll dip in the pin, so, and...
Holmes, duck!
Confound you! You've broken the phial!
Bravo, Watson. A perfectly placed drop kick. I wondered if it would occur to you to use your little black bag for a football.
Well, that was a narrow squeak, Dr. Watson.
It was indeed, Mr. Harris.
But even then, you were still tied to those chairs. Just how did you and Sherlock Holmes get away from the professor, Doctor?
Oh, at that point, Mr. Harris, Colonel Ross and Ned Hunter broke in and rescued us. We'd left them on the moors with instructions to come in and get us if we didn't return in half an hour. Why did you think Holmes became so chatty about Egyptian history?
You don't mean he was stalling?
Well, what do you think, Mr. Harris? What do you think?
Well, what could I think, Doctor? And now, Dr. Watson, how about giving us a hint about next week's story?
Yes, next week I think I shall tell the case of the Lucky Shilling. In it, Holmes prevented the death of a certain reckless young nobleman and acquired the money to pay for a much-needed operation. It was done with the not-too-honest racetrack device, which Holmes called the trick of the Lucky Shilling.
makers of Clippercraft clothes and 1,036 leading stores from coast to coast, have brought you another in the new series of broadcasts featuring the world's most famous detective, Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes is produced and directed by Basil Lochran, with special music by Albert Berman. If you don't know your Clippercraft dealer, write Clippercraft, 200 Fifth Avenue, New York City. Be sure to listen next week to Sherlock Holmes in the Case of the Lucky Shilling. If you'd like to attend the Sherlock Holmes broadcasts in New York, see your local Clippercraft dealer. He'll tell you how to obtain your tickets.
Welcome back. Well, a little bit of more spooky episode and a bit more sinister role for Professor Moriarty. And Watson ends up saving the day. The writers in this series don't give him a whole lot of opportunities to shine, but here a rugby move saves the day. It was a nice touch to use that. It wasn't referred much to in the canon of stories. And this is the first time I heard one of the writers bring it out. So I thought it was a nice touch. There's actually a real Blackheath rugby club, and it was actually started in 1858 and is the oldest rugby club on the planet, at least among the open rugby clubs. Well, we turn to listener comments, and we begin with one from the UK. Andy emails in to say, I enjoy listening to your Sherlock Holmes. Whilst I do my job as a gardener in the UK, you ask your listeners what their favorite episode was, and mine is the Blue Carbuncle. I'm not sure if you played this one recently, but it'd be nice if you did, and also as we are coming up on Christmas, it'd be a fitting episode to be broadcast as it is said at Christmas time. I saw the Jeremy Brett version of that. It is definitely a good story. We won't have it on at Christmas time this year, but because they didn't broadcast that in the first season of the John Stanley Sherlock Holmes episodes. However, we should have it for you in Christmas next year. And now we have a few listener comments from Podcast Alley. What a treat Murder Clinic was. From out of the blue, a new title, one I had never even heard of, combined with the occasional video. This is one intensive, interesting, and ever-changing podcast. Thanks. Well, thank you. And another one just said good shows. And finally, best podcast out there, listen or be a fool. All right. Well, thank you so much for all your comments and your enthusiasm. We will be back tomorrow with yours truly, Johnny Dollar. And on Thursday, next week, we're going to turn back the clock a bit and play the Christmas episode of Sherlock Holmes next week, and then their New Year's episode the week after that. Well, before we do get started, I want to encourage you, if you've got a Kindle, or you use one of the Kindle reading apps for your iPhone, Android, or other device, pick up a copy of my new ebook, All I Needed to Know I Learned from Columbo. It's a fun read. We take a great look at 7 great detectives, including Sherlock Holmes, Nero Wolfe, Columbo, and Adrian Monk, and we draw some good life lessons. All I Needed to Know I Learned from Columbo is available for $1.99 for your Kindle. We're working on getting in other ebook formats shortly. And also on sale, we have Tales of the Dim Night available now. It's my wife and I's first novel, available as an ebook for 99 cents. And that's available on Amazon, as well as Sony, Barnes & Noble. Dimnight.com has the links. All right, well, we're going to get into today's episode of yours truly, Johnny Dollar, the Chicago Fraud Matter.
From Hollywood, it's time now for John Lund as Johnny Dollar.
Niles Hartley, Johnny, Columbia Life.
Miles, how are you? I thought you were in Chicago these days.
I am.
long distance. We have one here that's a pimp.
Tell me about it.
One of our brokers wrote a $50,000 straight life policy on a man named Lane. Mr. Lane up and dropped dead a couple of days ago.
Uh-huh.
You'll never guess why.
Why?
He starved to death.
What?
Honest. He died of malnutrition.
A man could afford to buy that much life insurance, but he couldn't buy himself a hamburger?
Interested?
Very.
Get yourself an airplane, boy. I'll be waiting for you.
John Lund in a transcribed adventure of the man with the action-packed expense account. America's fabulous freelance insurance investigator.
Yours truly,
Johnny Dollar. Expense account submitted by Special Investigator Johnny Dollar to the Columbia Life and Accident Insurance Company, Meston Building, Chicago, Illinois. The following is an accounting of expenditures during my investigation of the Chicago fraud matter. Expense account item 1, $78.13. Plane fare and incidentals, Hartford to Chicago. I had breakfast at the airport, took the limousine into town, found a hotel room, then checked in with Niles Hartley at the claims division. Chicago's blustery climate seemed to agree with him. He was a little bigger than I remembered, a little ruddier, but efficient as ever.
I wrote a special delivery to the Insurance Commission in Springfield this morning. Explained we were holding up payment pending a routine investigation of the claim. But the faster we move on this, the better off we'll be, Johnny. We're going to ask questions, and we'll have to get ourselves some answers.
They asked any yet?
No, but the beneficiary is Lane's sister. Her name is Lydia Staley. She's called them. She's called us a couple of times, wanting to know what's what. Tough? She could be, I guess. She has money of her own, some influence, and so on.
A lot of money?
Trust stuff. Very comfortably fixed. But she's pretty upset by the whole business. You see, I had to stick my horn in right away and request the coroner to hold the body until we got something done.
How so?
Lane died on the street with no identification on him. By the time they did find out who he was, a routine PM had already been performed to determine cause. The county was going to bury him.
With $50,000 worth of insurance?
Yeah. Well, the first thing that occurred to me when I saw this report was that it might not be Lane at all. Besides the malnutrition, here, these findings.
Chronic heart condition. Lung history. Stability.
Certainly doesn't sound like anybody we'd insure.
Lane took a physical before the policy was issued, didn't he?
Yeah, sure.
Uh-huh.
Here's a copy of it. He was 100% okay then.
How could he pass it with all these things wrong with him?
Good question, Johnny. Like to find the answer?
Yeah. What's that doctor's name?
Dr. Walter Unger, Suite 1932, Michigan Building.
Expense account item 2, $3.50. Taxi fare through Chicago's slushy streets to the offices of Dr. Walter Unger, who had been licensed to practice medicine in the state of Illinois in 1946. He was a Northwestern University Medical School graduate.
And I'd give him the
married, had 2 children, and lived in Glencoe, a North Shore suburb. His income and practice, according to report, were average.
Good. Drop in tomorrow. Goodbye. I'm sorry, Mr. Dollar. You were saying...
I'm from the Columbia Life Insurance people, Doctor. Claims Division. I'd like to get some information about a man you examined on July 14th of last year.
All right. I hope this won't take long. What is it you want to know?
The man's name was Christopher Lane. You happen to remember him?
Christopher Lane. No, I can't say that I do, Mr. Dollar. What about him?
Well, first I'd like to know, is this your signature?
Yes. Those are my letterheads. I suppose that's my signature.
Aren't you sure?
How many people are certain of their signatures? It looks like mine, Mr. Dollar. Can't say for sure that it is or isn't.
Well, assuming that it is, what about these notes? Are these in your handwriting?
Yes, I would say that was also my handwriting. Mr. Dollar, I'd appreciate it very much if you'd get on with whatever business you have here.
According to this, you gave Mr. Lane a complete physical and pronounced him sound.
I did. Anything unusual about that?
He died 2 days ago, Doctor.
I wish you insurance people would buy some books on heart diseases and read them and know them and not take up valuable time. Look here. This patient was 41 years old. If he had no heart condition when I examined him, obviously he didn't, according to my cardiographic findings, it's entirely reasonable to assume that he could have developed one in a very short time. You people gauge that in your premium.
Mr. Lane didn't die of heart trouble, Doctor. He died of malnutrition.
Malnutrition?
That's what the pathologist at the coroner's office says. Here, look for yourself.
Well, he should know.
Was it possible for you to overlook that condition at the time you examined him?
No. No, if he'd been suffering from malnutrition in any degree, I would have discovered it.
According to the coroner's report, he'd been ill for a year or better. Can you explain that, Dr.
No, I can't explain that. I wish I could. All I can say is that I did my job. I examined the man, reported my findings.
How about this?
Angina. I could have missed that, I suppose, but it's unlikely with the degree of aggravation noted here.
Did you X-ray, Mr. Lane?
Certainly, it's part of the examination.
Have you had much experience reading chest X-rays, Doctor?
Mr. Dollar, I know my business. If there'd been any lesions in that man's chest, I would have reported.
Doctor, just bear with me, please. Again, the coroner's man said they were old lesions.
So I noticed. I can't explain that either.
Well, you can understand why we want to be thorough about this.
Yes, I do. And I wish I could help you.
You keep a file copy of all examinations?
Yes, certainly.
I'd like to see your file on this one, if I may.
Of course. Anything else?
Yeah. Another hour of your time.
What for?
I'd like to have you look at Mr. Lane's body, Doctor. I could get an injunction.
All right. I'll be finished here at 7 o'clock.
Expense account item 3, $6.50. More cab fare. To and from City Morgue. Dr. Unger viewed the mortal remains of Christopher Lane and was unable to state definitely whether he'd ever seen the man. The next day, all of the personnel connected with Dr. Unger's office made a trip to the morgue. None of them recognized the body either. However, I had better luck with the elevator operator in Lane's apartment building. You ever seen this man before, Miss Shattuck?
Yes. Yes, sir. That's Mr. Lane, apartment 233.
You're positive?
Oh, yeah. I see him every day from the street.
Okay. Want to smoke?
I want to get out of here.
Sure.
I don't know why I'm acting this way. I've seen him that way 100 times.
What?
I mean, almost like that, out, stoned. I mean, I guess it's because I knew he was just drunk then, not dead.
Oh, I see.
Oh, he was crazy.
Was he?
He was carrying on the way he did. Oh, feels good to be out here again, cold enough.
Yeah.
I'll take that smoke now, Mr. Dollar.
Oh, sure.
Thanks. Yeah, he used to get up around 10 every morning. I'd take him downstairs. Look awful, but he was always kind of nice, polite, you know.
Mm-hmm.
He'd go out to the store and come back in a little while with a sack of groceries, a pint of milk for his cat, some donuts for himself, and some booze. Then he'd just lock himself up in his apartment and stay there all day.
Drinking?
Oh, yeah. Fried to the ears by noon. I think it was wine.
The janitor and the maid, as well as the doorman and the desk clerk, further verified the fact that Lane had been drinking heavily for better than 18 months prior to his death. No one seemed to know why, not even his sister. She turned out to be a woman of 30 or more, well-tailored, well-groomed, and bad-mannered.
I wish you'd take your briefcase and get out of here, Mr. Dollar.
I'm sorry you feel that way, Mrs. Staley.
Chris drank himself to death. I don't know why. I just know he did it. He's dead. He named me his beneficiary. Why don't you pay me what you owe me?
We will, Mrs. Staley, if the circumstances are right. So far, we have a reasonable doubt.
Oh.
And this investigation is for your benefit as much as it is ours.
What do you mean by that?
When we've satisfied ourselves one way or the other, your claim can be settled.
Well, what is it you want to know? I haven't seen my brother in over a year. I can't tell you anything about him.
Were you on good terms with him?
Of course I was. Left me his insurance money, didn't he?
Understand you're a widow, Mrs. Staley?
I don't see what bearing
Do you
that
have any
has-
dependents?
No children, if that's what you mean.
And the insurance money would have gone to you alone?
Let me correct you. The money will come to me alone. I don't know what you people think you can do trying to weasel out of this, but I've already spoken with my attorneys, and they've advised me to sue for an immediate settlement.
Are they aware of the facts of this matter?
They certainly are.
And they still advise you to bring suit?
They certainly did.
Well, perhaps I can save you some fees and them some time. Who are your lawyers, Mrs. Staley?
Never mind. You'll find out soon enough.
All right, I'll tell you what I'd tell them. You can pass it on. Your brother could have died quietly in his bed one night, and any doctor would have pronounced him a heart failure, and your claim would have been good. But he made the mistake of dropping dead on a public street, and the police took over. And before he was properly identified, an autopsy had been performed.
Yes, and I'm going to sue the city for
And from that autopsy, we know your brother couldn't possibly have passed an insurance examination.
But he did pass it, Mr. Dollar. He came to me the day after he'd taken the exam and told me I was his beneficiary.
You said you hadn't seen him for over a year. He took the exam last summer.
All right. I saw him that one time.
He might have come to you, but he didn't come to you about passing that exam.
Now, listen here.
Your brother never took that exam.
What?
Someone went up to the doctor's office and took it for him. Mrs. Staley, we aren't fools. Now, we're going to find out who that someone was and how it was done. We're used to all sorts of tricks in this business, and all sorts of bluffing, too. You can sue us for settlement. You can sue us all over the place. With what we have right now, we just love to meet you in a court. I'm talking facts to you, Mrs. Staley, and I wish you'd talk them to me.
Get out of here. Get out of here, you cheap snooper, before I call a policeman and have you thrown out.
We'll return to yours truly, Johnny Dollar, in just a moment. Out of the jungles and into your homes comes Tarzan every Saturday night on CBS Radio. Yes, in the comfort of your own radio side, you can enjoy the fascinating experiences of the man whose friends are jungle beasts, whose power and cunning have been developed to an astonishing degree by dangerous environment. Tomorrow night, on most of these same stations, don't miss Tarzan on CBS Radio. Now, with our star, John Lund, we bring you the second act of yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
I started the case with an autopsy report and a dead man who should never have been insured. The doctor who examined him and passed him couldn't explain why. His sister, the beneficiary, explained even less. I left her under the surveillance of a leg man provided by Niles Hartley and decided to talk with the insurance broker who'd written up the policy. His name was Rutherford, and he looked insurance from the top of his iron gray hair to the tips of his highly polished brown shoes.
I suppose you're Mr. Dollar?
Mr. Rutherford?
Yeah, come in. I was surprised when you called me.
We're trying to wrap this thing up, Mr. Rutherford.
I understand. I'll tell you, I've been writing insurance for 17 years, Mr. Dollar, and this is the first time anything like this has ever occurred to me. So.
I believe you, Mr. Rutherford. And your record.
Oh? You've looked into me?
Well, you know, we have to on a thing like this. Just a matter of routine checking.
Yeah.
I'm here to find out all I can about the circumstances under which you sold the policy to Mr. Lane.
Mm-hmm.
He was a bachelor. He lived in a fairly nice apartment on the Gold Coast. No dependents. I'd like to know what made him a prospect.
Well, actually, it's more of a personal thing, I suppose. Mrs. Rutherford and I were interested in buying a home in Wilmette a couple of years ago. It was one we liked on Sheridan Road. The agent happened to be this man, Lane. That's how we became acquainted.
Oh.
Lane was in the real estate business, on and off. Actually, he didn't really have to work for a living at all. He had a fairly comfortable income from trusts set up by his father.
Did he do very well in real estate?
Well, I don't really think so. I don't think he worked hard at it.
You met him when you were out to buy a house. Did you buy it?
No. My wife died suddenly, and I had no need to buy a house.
But he bought insurance from you.
Yes, eventually.
You say this was a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Did you try to sell him right away?
Oh, I don't recall. I called him now and then, had him over for dinner. I was surprised, frankly, when he decided to buy.
Uh-huh. What kind of a man was he?
What do you mean?
In your opinion, Mr. Rutherford.
Well, client, Mr. Dollar, I treated him the same as any other client.
How did he look?
Oh,
pale, thin, healthy, emaciated. What?
He looked fine to me.
I noticed you arranged for the examination.
Yes.
How well do you know Dr. Unger?
Just slightly. You know, the physician is supposed to be an impartial third party. And when a client has to be examined by a physician, I send him to Dr. Unger, that's all. I get a Christmas card from him every year.
I see. You say you had Lane over for dinner a few times.
Yes, when my wife was alive.
Did he drink much on those occasions?
I don't recall. Why?
His malnutrition resulted from an alcoholic condition. All drinking, no eating.
Lane, an alcoholic?
He sure was. Had been for years. Can I use your phone?
Yeah, help us out.
Johnny Dollar, Niles.
Oh, glad you called, Johnny. Trying to reach you.
What's up?
Mrs. Staley's fighting back.
Huh?
Her lawyers served notice on us an hour ago.
Well, nothing to worry about there. Just a bluff.
Oh, but this wasn't. She made the coroner release her brother's body. Took it to a crematorium. Exhibit A is a pile of ashes by now.
Oh. I can try something here.
We'll try it.
Right. Mr. Rutherford.
All finished?
Yeah. Mr. Rutherford, I'm afraid you're in a little trouble.
Well, what are you?
You couldn't have written that policy or known Christopher Lane without being aware of his drinking habits.
Now, see here, Dollar. I've been an insurance broker for a good long time, and no one has ever questioned my integrity.
And I think that's what you were banking on, your reputation. I'm sorry for you, Mr. Rutherford, but there had to be a collusion here, and you're the logical party. You arranged for someone to take Lane's examination. You were going to split with... Oh! In the 3 minutes it took me to get my breath inside of me and my feet under me, he was well away and out of sight. I used his telephone a second time. I told Niles Hartley what had happened and then made a beeline for Lydia Staley's place.
What do you want?
I'm here to tell you about all the trouble you're in, Mrs. Staley. Rutherford's given it away.
Given what? What are you talking about?
About an insurance policy that was written up and issued in your brother's name under fraudulent circumstances. You're the one who stood to gain most, but you had to have help to pull it off. Rutherford helped you.
I don't know anybody named Rutherford. Now, look here,
No, you look here. Rutherford just slugged me and beat it, but he isn't going to run far. Principally because he doesn't know how to run. He'll cool off, and he'll begin thinking about all this business in a new light. A few minutes ago, it dawned on him what he'd done. He'd kicked his whole lifetime right out the window. He's been found out. He's lost all around. He's going to be mad. And you're the one he's going to be mad at.
I told you I don't know anybody named Rutherford.
Well, then I'll tell you. He'll probably want to kill you.
Oh.
Do we talk now?
I don't see why. I've done nothing wrong.
Who took that physical for your brother?
He took it himself.
You got your brother drunk enough to sign the insurance papers, didn't you?
I had nothing to do with them.
Okay, Mrs. Staley. We'll get it all from Rutherford.
Yes. Why don't you do that?
In the meantime, I hope you sleep well, knowing what you've done.
I've done nothing. And you'll never prove any of these things you've been saying. Never.
And for 2 days, it looked as if she might have been right. There was no way to involve Mrs. Staley without a statement from Rutherford. In the name of the company, Niles Hartley filed charges on attempted collusion against him, and a warrant was issued. The Chicago police were unable to find him anywhere. His apartment was watched 24 hours a day, as well as Mrs. Staley's residence. The case was stalemated. We couldn't locate Rutherford, but he found us. Johnny Dollar.
This is Earl Rutherford.
Where are you?
Never mind. Dollar, they all know about me around Niles' office, huh?
Just Niles and me.
I'd like to explain some things to you so you can pass them on to Niles. I'd like him to know why I did it. And, before I leave town.
You won't get far. There's a warrant out for you.
I can get away, all right.
Rutherford, Columbia doesn't want to prosecute you on these charges. The notoriety would be bad for them. If you'd make a statement, sign it, I think I could talk them into dropping the whole matter.
Maybe we'd better get together?
Come on over.
No, I'll meet you at the Dearborn entrance to the Drummond.
15 minutes?
I'll be there.
Right. When I pulled up in a cab 12 minutes later, he was waiting for me at the curb in front of the Drummond. He was still wearing the same clothes he'd had on in his apartment. He needed a shave, and judging from the circles under his eyes, he hadn't slept much. He was pale and shaken. Expense account item 4, 51 cents. Coffee and donuts for both of us.
I met Lydia right after Miriam, my wife, died. My children are both grown and married and have lives of their own. I guess I was very lonely.
Sure.
I became interested in Lydia, and we had a great many things in common. Seemed like the thing to do. I asked her to marry me.
Nothing wrong with that.
You don't understand. She laughed at me.
No, I don't understand.
I guess I'm not an exciting man, a witty one, or... She made me feel as though all my life had been hopeless, a waste. That I'd missed a great deal. I asked her, Mr. Dollar, what is it? What do you want out of life?
Is that when she brought up the proposition?
I guess that's what gave her the idea. The trusts pay her $500 a month for life, and my commissions come to that. We could have lived very comfortably on $1,000, but Lydia talked of traveling, of Europe, of clothes. I don't know, things her family had had once.
She wanted $50,000 in cash instead of money just trickling in every month, huh?
I suppose so.
I didn't understand her motive at first, but go on.
Well, she told me about her brother Christopher. He was a drunk. The doctors in New York gave him 2 years. I paid a man $100 to go to Dr. Unger's office and take the physical.
What's the man's name?
I wouldn't tell you that, Mr. Dollar. He's not involved in anything, and I don't want to get him into any trouble.
After Lane was insured, you were going to wait for him to die?
That was the general idea. Once I'd done it, it was too late to turn back. I mean, I wanted to at times, but a cancellation on a policy that size would have been hard to explain.
You're leaving something out. She had you, didn't she?
Hmm?
You were the goat. Legally, she was clear, right?
Yes. She still is, isn't she?
Unless you write all this down, we can hold it over her head to prove collusion.
You speak to Niles?
He'll go along. The charges will be dropped if you'll make a statement.
Okay.
Enclosed, find notarized statement of Earl Rutherford explaining his part in the attempted collusion regarding policy 678JN23L. True to his word, Niles Hartley dropped charges against Rutherford upon receipt of the enclosed. Rutherford settled his affairs and left Chicago the following day. When Mrs. Staley was shown a carbon of the enclosed statement, she instructed her attorneys to withdraw suit. The night I was to leave town, I called at her apartment to have her sign a release of all claims.
Help me, Mr. Dollar.
Which way did he go?
I'll
carried her to the couch, did what I could, while startled tenants phoned for an ambulance and the police. After that, I began looking around. I found a dark stain on the windowsill leading out onto the fire escape, and on the floor a blood-stained letter opener. There was no gun anywhere in sight. I decided that if I'd been stabbed with a letter opener, it'd be easier to try 3 flights up to the roof than 14 down to the alley. I was right. Earl Rutherford was hanging over the top ledge of the building, firing down at me. I ducked into a window frame, 1 flight away from him.
Get away from me, Dollar!
You know I won't, Rutherford. You missed by a mile. You'll have to come down. It's the end of the line for you.
Don't do anything foolish!
I'm coming up after you.
Come on, then. I'll be waiting for you.
Good shot, Dollar.
Can you walk?
No.
Why did you do it, Rutherford? You were clear. You were free. You didn't have to...
I didn't tell it all, Dollar. She told me tonight. Laughed at me. Said she was planning to run away with someone else when she got the insurance money.
Oh, I see.
She just used me all.
Earl Rutherford died on the way to the receiving hospital. Mrs. Staley was dead when I got back to the apartment. Expense account item 5, $53. Hotel and food while in Chicago. Item 6, same as item 1. Fare back to Hartford. Expense account total, $219.77. Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, stars John Lund in the title role and was written by E. Jack Newman with music by Eddie Dunstetter. John Lund can currently be seen in the Universal International picture Just Across the Street. Featured in tonight's cast were Jack Moyles, Edgar Barrier, Peggy Weber, Mary Lansing, and John McIntyre. Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, is transcribed in Hollywood by Jaime Del Valle. This is Dan Cubberly, inviting you to join us next week at this time when John Lund returns as...
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
If you like your thrills to be real, your adventures to be true to life, Gangbusters is the show for you. Every Saturday night, most of these same CBS radio stations bring you Gangbusters, full of action, bravery, and realistic excitement. Listen for new thrills on Gangbusters, straight out of life, every Saturday night on CBS Radio.
America now listens to 105 million radio sets and listens most to the CBS Radio Network.
Welcome back. Well, they did a good job, I think, coming up with a credible insurance fraud. This definitely was it. Of course, some of the monetary figures, she earned $500 a month, I earned $500 a month. We could have made a good living that way. You always have to be adjusting for modern times. I tend to automatically multiply by 8 for anything in the 1950s. And so if you do that, then it does come out to be a pretty good living. Of course, the typical kind of noirish love story. This episode was another one of those that was remade by Bob Bailey. This one was as the Lansing Fraud Matter. So they stayed pretty close to the title, just moved the city. Well, we turn now to listener comments and feedback. Special thanks to Nora, who sends along a tip, and I'll be sending her access to our premium site at greatdetectives.net, which is available to everyone who donates $7 or more. Earl emails in to say, I like this podcast. And then we have a comment from Podcast Alley. Keep up the good work. Thanks for all your hard work and enthusiasm doing the show. From Rich in Georgetown, Kentucky. Well, thanks so much, Rich. That will actually do it for today. We will be back on Monday with Barrie Craig, Confidential Investigator. Look forward next week to our Christmas shows. In the meanwhile, if you have a comment, send it to Box 13 at greatdetectives.net. Follow us on Twitter at Radio Detectives and give us a call 208-991-4783. But from Boise, Idaho, this is your host, Adam Graham, signing off.